Good evening, Mayor. If it's okay with you, I just wanted to announce quick housekeeping for those in attendance tonight.
Go ahead, Mr. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for joining us tonight, members of the audience and panelists. We ask that everyone please remain on mute to reduce the ambient noise. And when it is your turn to speak in the meeting, whether it's public comment or you're here to present, we will go ahead and make that announcement. I appreciate everyone's patience and thank you for joining us once again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mr. City Clerk, do we have all the council members in attendance?
And I believe we do. Let me just make a quick double check. Yes, sir. I believe we are good to go.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I call to order the November 24th, 2020 regular meeting of the City Council. Would you all join me and the City Clerk in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Mr. City Clerk, would you take the roll call, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato,
Here.
Councilmember Campbell,
Here.
Councilmember Fangari,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy,
Here.
and Mayor Massey.
Here.
We have full quorum to proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Eddie. Mr. City Attorney, would you please deliver the closed session report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to report that this regular meeting of the Hermosa Beach City Council was called to order at 5 p.m. this afternoon. There were no public comments on the closed session agenda. At the outset, it was reported that Mayor Massey would be no longer recused from item 2 on the closed session agenda due to the elimination of the basis of his conflict of interest. The City Council then recessed into closed session. And with respect to item 2A on the agenda, Hermosa Fitness versus City of Hermosa Beach, the City Council unanimously, with Councilmember Campbell recused, voted and directed the City Attorney to file an appeal of the Superior Court judgment in that case. There are no other reportable actions taken in closed session this evening. And that concludes my report. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. City Clerk, what's next on our agenda? You're on mute.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. Next, we have announcements.
All right, thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any announcements they would like to share? Seeing none, as the mayor, I do have a lengthy list of announcements, so let me jump right into them. The first relates to the Tri-Cities Homeless Partnership Community Roundtable. On Thursday, December 10th, 2020, from 7 o'clock to 8:30 p.m., the cities of Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach, and Redondo Beach, along with Harbor Interfaith Services, will hold a virtual community meeting to discuss the goals and accomplishments of the partnership and answer questions from the community. The community meeting was originally scheduled for last March, but was postponed due to COVID-19. Speakers will include representatives from Harbor Interfaith, LA County Department of Mental Health, Beach Cities Health District, the Manhattan Beach City Manager's Office, the Manhattan Beach Police Department, and the Redondo Beach City Prosecutor. We will also have a representative from the Hermosa Beach Police Department to answer questions specific to the City of Hermosa Beach. Attendees are encouraged to submit their questions in advance, as a limited question and answer period will be provided. Please see the flyer attached to tonight's the agenda for tonight's City Council meeting for information on how you can participate and submit questions. With the holiday seasons approaching, I am pleased to present to you the 28th Annual Beach Cities Toy Drive. It will continue this year despite COVID-19, but due to COVID-19, the toy wrapping party is canceled. However, you can still donate unwrapped new toys, I should say, to our local fire station or police department. You can also donate unwrapped new toys at the drive-through events scheduled for December 5th and December 12th at the Hermosa Beach City Hall parking lot from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Toys are given to children serviced by local charities. Please see the event flyer that is attached to the agenda for tonight's City Council meeting for more details on how you can participate in the 28th Annual Beach Cities Toy Drive. The Beach Cities Health District 22nd Annual Holiday Gift Bag Program is also upon us. The holidays can be a difficult and lonely time for older adults and adults with disabilities in our community, but it doesn't have to be that way. Each holiday season since 1998, Beach Cities Health District, along with friendly volunteers, deliver gift bags filled with practical and fun gifts to Beach Cities seniors and adults with disabilities, many of whom are homebound or live in isolation. Due to local health orders and the vulnerable population this program serves, volunteers won't be able to help deliver bags this year. Beach Cities Health District staff and essential service volunteers will deliver bags following strict safety protocols. Instead of helping with delivery of the gift bags, the Health District is asking the community to assist with the project by coloring and decorating a holiday card to be inserted in each gift bag. Holiday card templates can be downloaded at www.bchd.org/holiday gift bags. Once again, that is www.bchd.org/holiday gift bags. Return cards to volunteer services by Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. This can be done via mail or at the drop-off location. Please see the program website attached to tonight's agenda for this City Council meeting for the mailing address and drop-off location. If mailing, please mail a few days prior to December 1st to ensure they receive the cards in time. And with the December 1st deadline, I would encourage folks to spend a little bit of time over the Thanksgiving holiday filling out your cards so that they can be timely delivered to our friends at the Beach Cities Health District. Lastly, the Hermosa Beach local gift exchange is also upon us. Continuing with the holiday gift theme, I'm excited to share that one of our residents, Jessica Acamando, has started a local gift exchange to support our local businesses. Everyone participating would commit to buying one gift for someone in the community, up to $20. The webpage will also include a local gift guide for folks wanting to do more local shopping this holiday season. The last day to RSVP for this event is November 30th. So in 6 days from today. Please see the link attached to this agenda for more information and check back often at the link for updates on the Hermosa Beach local gift exchange. And with that, Mr. City Clerk, we are on to our next agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to approval of the agenda. So I'll turn that back over to you if you'd like to proceed with that.
Sure. And before I query my colleagues, Mr. City Attorney, the approval of the agenda item is not one that we open up for public comment, correct?
That's correct. This is just your opportunity to decide whether you need to postpone any items or to move things around for your convenience.
Okay. And do we typically take a roll call vote for this, or is it simply I call for any objections, and if there are no objections, we approve the agenda?
You would take a roll call vote to approve the agenda.
All right, thank you, Mike. All right, approval of the agenda. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or input on tonight's agenda? Councilmember Campbell.
I don't have any input. I was just going to make a motion to approve. So I'll wait to see if there's any questions before I do.
Councilmember Armato, did you have any questions?
No.
All right, back to you, Councilmember Campbell. Please do make a motion.
Great. I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Armato, do you second?
Second.
All right. Any further question or comment from my colleagues? Seeing none, Mr. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato,
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy,
Aye.
and Mayor Massey.
Aye.
The agenda is approved.
All right. Thank you, Eddie.
My pleasure,
And,
Mr. Mayor.
And what is our next agenda item?
So that takes us to item number 7, proclamations and presentations. And under item 7A, we have our Beach Cities Health District COVID-19 health update. And we have Jacqueline Sun and Tom Backley to provide a presentation. So if you'd like to invite them to speak, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
All right. Welcome back, Jacqueline and Tom. We missed you 2 weeks ago, so we're glad to have you back. And I'm sure your presentation will be timely. Welcome.
Good to be back. Jacqueline's going to kick things off. We do have a slide presentation. We'll go quickly through that and answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much. Jacqueline Sun from the Beach Cities Health District. It continues to be a pleasure to provide these updates to the council and the community. Eddie, I'll take the next slide. For the situational update, you may have heard that things are getting a little dire out there with in the US, 12.5 million cases of COVID and 258,000 deaths reported. We're averaging 173,000 new cases per day in the US, and those trends are being reflected across the state and in the county. As you see our graphs here, the average daily new cases higher than it's ever been in LA County since the start of this pandemic. And similarly, while the average daily reported deaths have been on a decline, we have seen a spike. And so it's pretty alarming to see the rate of increase of these average daily new cases. And I'll take the next slide to show you the trends of where we have been and where we are now. So just a month ago versus today, we've seen 174% increase in daily new cases in LA County, almost a doubling of hospitalizations. Today we're at 1,483, almost a doubling of our positivity rate, and similarly an increase of the positivity rate at our BCHD testing site, though not as dramatic as what we're seeing at the county as a whole. We'll take the next slide. So here you see our blueprint, California blueprint for a safer economy, where counties are assigned to tiers based on their case rate and their positivity rate. I think that what's been alarming the past couple of weeks is just how much of the state is in tier 1. We have 45 counties in the state that are in the most restrictive tier, including Los Angeles. These numbers just came out this afternoon. So our adjusted daily new case rate is 16.0. Last week it was at 13.7, and the week before it was at 7.6. So pretty quick increase in these cases. Just a month ago, we were trying to get under 7 daily new cases so that we can move into tier 2, but it looks like a lot is being rolled back. Our positivity rate has also increased. Last week we were at 5.3%, and this week we are at 6.6%. So I'll take the next slide to show some of the trends that we're seeing. Of course, this familiar graph that you are seeing, this is the cumulative cases per 100,000 in the South Bay. So from the duration of the pandemic, where the beach cities in the South Bay are relative to the county, where we have black is LA County as a whole, orange is Inglewood, yellow is Hawthorne. We have Hermosa in green, Manhattan in red, Torrance is gray, blue is Redondo, and purple is El Segundo. We have historically seen that in the beach cities, the cases we're faring a little better than we are at the county as a whole. But I'll take the next slide to show that the cases are increasing in the beach cities, where this is beach cities new cases by week, where the colors still correspond. We have Redondo in blue, Manhattan in red, and Hermosa in green. So you see by week how the cases have increased, and we're seeing pretty steady increase the past couple of weeks. Next slide, please. This is our daily new cases per 100,000. So where the other chart showed cumulatively the case numbers. This is our daily new cases, so it gives a more accurate snapshot of where we stand today and how the cities compare to the county as a whole. Where black again is LA County, you see really dramatic increases in our daily new case rate. And again, with some of the South Bay and the beach cities faring a little better, but at the same time, pretty alarming increases where I think Hermosa is at 17, the case rate is 17 per 100,000, the past 7-day average. And I'll turn it over to Tom to talk a little bit more about the restrictions and what we're seeing both from the county and the state in the next slide.
Great. Thanks, Jacqueline. So these numbers are obviously prompting action from LA County. And so you can see here, I won't read all of this in detail, but this is due to the average number of cases, hospitalizations that the county is seeing. So the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health outlined thresholds for new restrictions based upon an average of the numbers. And so the big one that we're seeing today is that outdoor dining is going to no longer be allowed. That's for a 3-week period. And basically they set these thresholds, and so we've gone over them. And so you can see the threshold that would determine what the county would do regarding outdoor dining was crossed here with the 4,266 over the 4,000. Again, you can see that if we head over 4,500 or if hospitalizations go more than 2,000 per day, there will be more restrictions like a safer at home order. And so this is a matrix, if you will, or a way for making decisions that LA County has implemented. And so they're following through on the first one that you see there today as it relates to outdoor dining. The next one we'll be watching, obviously, is if the 5-day goes from 4,266 up to 4,500, then they will be looking at a safer at home order. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in-person dining will be prohibited for a minimum of 3 weeks, starting November 25th at 10 p.m. Takeout drive-through will continue to be allowed. Non-essential businesses and personal gatherings will be prohibited from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. during the evening. For non-essential businesses, occupancy will be limited to 25%. The number of customers for card rooms, I don't think Hermosa has a lot of these, or batting cages, but again, even with outdoor, going to be limited to 50%. Personal care establishments will be only allowed by appointment, and both the customer and the staff will need to wear face coverings. Again, non-essential retail establishments must close from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then outdoor gatherings will need to only be outside and only include 15, no more than 15 people, and cannot represent more than 3 households. So this is some of the messaging that we've been working on. I know with the holidays here, with Thanksgiving in a couple of days, we're all trying to balance this and figure out what's safe for our family. So we just created this. Again, obviously you want to be on the left-hand side there. If you do gather, we recommend that it be outside, that basically everybody wear a mask, wash your hands, the things that we've been hearing. Again, if you've got to gather, we urge that it be outside. Unsafe would be large gathering, especially indoors. Any sort of potluck. So if people are gathering, we're urging them to bring their own meals or figure out a way that their own family eats out of kind of the same meal box or whatever people may be using. Again, we suggested some things that people could do on the safe side virtually. I know that's hard for people. Our son's not coming home from school, and I think that's the first time in a while that he hasn't been home for Thanksgiving. So it's a difficult time, and we just wanted to present some of these tips for celebrating safely. And I'm sure we'll have as those of you that know Henry, we're going to have a lively Zoom call with him, I imagine, on Thanksgiving. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about our testing and make sure that everybody understands we are an LA County site. We're doing this at Beach Cities Health District at the old South Bay Hospital there at Prospect and Barrel. You need to have at least one symptom consistent with COVID-19 or be an essential worker, or if you've had close contact with someone in the past 14 days. We're doing about 600 tests a day now. That's doubled from where we were about a month ago at 300 a day. If you need a test, you can sign up there. The website is on there. I think right now what you'll see is if Beach Cities doesn't pop up, that means that we don't have slots available for tomorrow. You can check back in on another day, or you can come to the site and we'll see if we can get you a test. Information and referrals. If anybody has any questions about anything to do with COVID, this is our Beach Cities line that we've expanded the hours on, and we have it's staffed here Monday through Friday, but if you call on the weekend, we'll be able to have someone call you back. It's 310-374-3426, extension 256. We've seen the number of calls really increase here on this line, so people are utilizing it, and we urge people to continue to do that so they can find out information about testing or restrictions or any questions that they might have, or if they'd like a meal delivered or errands for older adults. Those are all things that we're doing. Next slide, please. So on December 9th, I know that's a busy week. Sounds like there are a couple meetings happening, but we are doing our third Safe in the South Bay series, Live Well During COVID. So we're going to have some high school students there. We're going to have Dr. Mo Galbert from Thelma Macmillan talking about what we're really worried about at this point, which is people's mental health during COVID. Obviously, we're very concerned about the uptick that we're seeing, but mental health is an area that we're going to be focusing on here as we move forward. And then we have Dr. James McKinnell from Torrance Memorial is going to be on the panel as well. And so we hope that people will come and learn about all these topics, whether it's vaccines or support, resilience during the holidays. Those are all things that we're going to be focusing on. So we want to talk briefly about vaccines, sort of on the good news side of things, if you will. So we are seeing a couple of vaccines that are showing some promise. You can see from Pfizer and Moderna. Those are very high effective rates there of roughly 95%. They need to be stored at extremely low temperatures. And so that's something that logistically will need to be dealt with when vaccines are being distributed. You can see as far as their shelf life, if you will. Right now, they're both requiring 2 doses. And so just wanted to start to talk about vaccines. I know our attention is on how we stay safe during the holidays, how we see our families, support our families, how we support our businesses with changes, sort of rollbacks, if you will, that are going to affect the economy and the businesses. I know that's obviously top of our list tonight. And vaccines will be what we're going to be really talking about in the next 1 to 2 months. And so we wanted to kind of start that discussion. We think the vaccine discussion will basically take over here in the next 1 to 2 months. So we're working to prepare for that and just briefly talk a little bit about what that looks like. We can go to the next slide. So like the testing, we think it's going to ramp up like it did for testing, where phase 1 is going to be very limited doses. They're going to be available for emergency service workers, healthcare professionals, extremely at-risk people. Then you can see where we'll have a larger number of doses available in the commercial sector, public health. And then phase 3, as things are continuing to get better at the vaccination stage, then we're going to shift to a routine strategy. And so this is how the flow is going to work of vaccines. It's going to come from the federal government to the state, then large multi-jurisdictional entities. So that'll be large health providers. And so we are working with them right now at the health district to assist them in any way we can with vaccine distribution in the South Bay. And then counties or MPOD, those are medical points of distribution. Hermosa is an MPOD, so Brandy and your team are already working on that and looking at what that looks like for Hermosa Beach. And we're here to support what I would call sort of the public distribution of the vaccines. And so Beach Cities is here to support the MPODs. Hermosa and Manhattan have one, or each have one. And then Redondo Beach is also applying to be an MPOD as well. And then there'll be local enrolled vaccine providers, but we think where we're going to mostly focus is on those 2 boxes there. And I think that covers our presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jacqueline. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Let me see if I can expand my screen to make sure I see everybody. I can't, Councilmember Campbell, I can see your hand. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, as always, for your report tonight to our partners at Beach Cities Health District. Have you ever been given an explanation for the recent move to eliminate outdoor dining or on-site dining at all for 3 weeks? What's the logic behind 3 weeks specifically? Because as I see the numbers and the vaccine is on the horizon, but certainly won't be here in 3 weeks. Can you explain to us why that is a marker that is worth evaluation, or if you know? Thank you for.
Yeah, we do. And Jacqueline can give you the exact numbers, but the county has been looking at the data as it relates to food services. And so that is on the rise as far as infections. That's something that includes restaurants as well as food distribution centers. So that was part of the logic, if you will, behind looking at that change and the rise in numbers. Jacqueline, do you want to get into the details a little more?
Yeah, I think that some of the, to answer the question about the duration, I think it's just with, as any of the changes are implemented, there's also always a lag to see if it's effective, right? So the things that we do, the numbers that we're seeing today were from the actions from 2 weeks ago. So a lot of, takes a little bit of time to see the impact. And I think that especially from today, the Board of Supervisors meeting, just talking about restaurants and outdoor dining, unfortunately taking the brunt of some of these restrictions that we're seeing right now. And that's just due to the risk factors of mostly people gathering, sometimes with folks outside of their households, and when you're eating without your masks. I think that that's part of the reasoning that the county is coming from in terms of some of these rollbacks.
Another thing I would add is I've seen an increase of about 67% in outbreaks at general work sites. And so you're seeing that is another reason why the county is targeting some of those restrictions that we outlined.
Right, thank you for that. I mean, it kind of explains, I'm guessing, as I've always followed this, that it takes about 2 weeks to reveal an impact if everyone were to kind of clamp back and stay away from one another to begin to see any kind of reflection in the numbers. And so we do have some hope of putting the brakes on still, even as we wait for the vaccines to become available and prevalently dispersed, et cetera. So I guess that means they'll take a look, and we all, of course, very present to the idea that if the numbers keep spiking and there's so much more spread out there to fuel the spike, that we could be looking at an extension of that, certainly if we don't really take a hard stop on those measures and really comply. So, but thank you for that.
Yeah, as we saw from the numbers, we're not far from the next threshold of the safer at home order, and the county has shown that they're following their plan. They narrowly did that today. The board supervisors took a vote, but they are following their plan. So
Councilmember Fangari.
Thank you. And thank you both for the update. Again, Tom, as I mentioned to you in our prior conversations, it's really, really helpful to get you guys updates on these on an ongoing basis. I really appreciate it. My quick question is, when I see these graphs that you guys put together, which are really nice, with the color coding of the various cities, unfortunately, I see Hermosa Beach's green line going up. I'd like to say that our line is lower than Manhattan and Redondo, our two neighbors, but unfortunately ours is going higher. And I wanted to know, based on your experience with the three cities, do you have any reason or rationale of why the Hermosa Beach numbers are peaking higher than Manhattan or Redondo based on the last few weeks? I think it started somewhere in August, and it seems like our graph just continues to go up for the last few weeks.
Yeah, Jacqueline and I talked about that a little bit today, and Jacqueline can add some more details. We're not sure. If we had to guess, we would basically say that what we're hearing from the county is that the people who are getting sick here in this latest surge are younger, and we know that Hermosa skews a little younger than Redondo and Manhattan, and so again, it's hard to know without a lot of the detailed data, but if we had to sort of take a guess there, it would seem to be correlated to age, in that Hermosa is a little younger. But again, we don't know for sure. Jacqueline, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, hard to see without having the details of who's being infected. And I think that something with the charts too, though, it's you know, we have the case rates at per 100,000. So you see that any additional cases has a larger magnitude of effect in Hermosa than it would, you know, another city with 3 times the population. But at the same time, that's, you know, that breaks down the case rate. You know, without further details about where these clusters are, who these folks are, you know, it's really hard to extrapolate why one city's cases are higher than another. And I think it just has to do with, you know, the level of exposure that people have, you know, if they are able to work from home, or if they have to be, if they have jobs where there's constant exposure. That's one factor. How many people are gathering and with whom. And as Tom said, some of these demographic shifts in age are definitely some of the reasons that we're seeing for some of the increased case rates, but can't really pinpoint for sure what's happening in Hermosa.
All right, thank you very much. And then my last question is, for the upcoming holiday, obviously the county is doing what they're doing regarding restaurants, we understand that, but do you have any other recommendations for both the residents of Hermosa Beach and the city as staff as to what not to do or what to do? I mean, obviously the obvious is clear that, you know, wear masks and don't travel and don't have, you know, big gatherings, but do you have anything else based on your knowledge of Hermosa Beach that you think we should be focused on, or our staff should be focused on as far as enforcement of the next weekend?
Well, we know that that this virus travels from person to person, and it's based upon behavior. And so again, I think all those things you mentioned are what people should be doing. I think what we've learned, not just as health professionals, but also as just people here over the last 9 months, is this really comes down to risk tolerance and what people are, what sort of risks people are willing to take. And right now is not the time to be taking risks. And with the way these numbers are spiking, and we can say, hey, they're not as high in the South Bay as they are in the county, but people are coming here, as we know. Any of us that have been down on the Strand or elsewhere know that there are a lot of people out. And so I guess my comment would just be about risk, and just it's a personal decision. We don't want to make decisions for anybody, but we're going to provide information. And some of you know me, I'm not adverse to risk, but this would be the time to not be taking risks, would be my advice. And Jacqueline, anything you'd like to add, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that these numbers are pretty, they're pretty grim. And I think that it's, you know, I've been tracking these numbers since the beginning of the pandemic, and we really haven't seen increases that we've seen. So it really is, if there's a time for us to hunker down, not, have some of the concessions of, especially with the holiday week, really hopeful that we won't see increases beyond what we're seeing now. But if there was ever a time to really try to nip it in the bud, make sure that we don't have excess number of cases, deaths, hospitalizations, it really is up to us. And it really is an inflection point if we haven't reached it already. We're entering the winter months, and we knew that it was going to be tough. Obviously, we see a vaccine in the horizon, but we just have to continue to do the things that we know work, even though we're fatigued and exhausted from this pandemic. But if there was ever a time, as Tom said, it is now.
All right, thank you both. I appreciate it. I'm done with the questions, Tristan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all. Mr. City Attorney.
Mayor, I know this is unorthodox, but if you would indulge me, I would just like to ask Jacqueline and Tom a quick question that I think might just be of benefit to folks who are listening, because I'm out running almost every day, and I'm down at the Strand and I'm on the bike path, both in Hermosa Beach and Manhattan Beach. And I noticed that there are a great many people who run, particularly on the Strand, and who are cycling, who are not wearing masks. I just wonder if you have an opinion about whether being outdoors and exercising is somehow safer for those who are running or riding their bikes without wearing masks, or whether it endangers others who are out there. Also, I know that the Strand is not very wide, and so it's not easy to stay 6 feet apart, particularly when you're passing people. And I just noticed that many people who are exercising simply are not wearing masks, maybe because they think that because they're outdoors, they're not creating a problem or they're not putting themselves at risk. And I keep asking myself this question day after day after day, and I just wondered if you could offer an answer to that.
Well, we can try. I'll start, and then Jacqueline can chime in. So the guidance is, if you're going to be outside and potentially come into close contact within 6 feet of somebody, that you should wear a mask outside while you're exercising. That's the guidance. And so as Americans and free spirits, we I never read the VCR instructions back in the day, right? And so we tend to take guidelines, like Bill Murray or Jack Sparrow, talk about in the movies. But this, it's also a guideline that if you're going to jump out of a airplane, that you wear a parachute. So I guess that's how I would say it right now. It's a guideline. It's suggested that you wear a mask when you're outside, even when you're exercising, if you're going to come in contact with somebody. And people are using their own discretion and sort of making judgments about that and doing their own risk assessment, if you will. And what's tricky about this is they may be okay with that risk of not wearing a mask outside, but the person next to them may not. And so we would urge people to, obviously we have free choice, but to also respect the choice of others. So I don't know, Jacqueline, if you have anything else to add there.
No, I think you said it pretty well. The only thing is, while we know that it is safer to be outdoors, it's still not a non-zero risk, right? There's still ability for you to contract the disease even if you're outdoors, and I think we've seen evidence of that. So it's a great question. I think we hear it a lot, and it's something where if I'm out walking, I always, even if I'm not around people, I wear my mask in case I might run into somebody, and it's just I view it as a courtesy that I'm paying to the people around me. So great question.
Any additional comments from any members of the council? Okay. For everybody listening, as we come into the holiday season, protect yourself, protect your loved ones. That's the best way you can protect frontline healthcare workers get our local businesses back to normal operation, get our kids back to school, protect first responders. Do the simple things. Celebrate within your household, avoid indoor gatherings, and wear a mask when you're outside of your household. The simple things will go a long way if we all do them to making sure that we can bring in the new year in a few weeks with brighter days ahead, and we can get through the holiday season with as much joy as possible. So thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Tom, for presenting. Thank you to my colleagues for all the questions. Thanks, Mike, for your contribution of your question as well and your comment. And we look forward to seeing you all again in a couple weeks, and hopefully very soon we'll have better news to report to discuss.
Thank you.
Mr. City Clerk, what is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 7B, recognizing Clean Bay restaurants. And we have environmental program specialist Douglas Cross here to provide the information on this presentation. Douglas,
right.
are you there?
Thank you, Eddie. Welcome, Doug.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Very pleased tonight to be acknowledging our city's recently awarded Clean Bay certified restaurants. This is a program the Bay Foundation launched in 2008 to improve the health of Santa Monica Bay by recognizing establishments that are environmentally proactive, that integrate sustainability and ocean-mindedness into their business practices. Hermosa Beach has participated in the program for many years. And this program also serves to satisfy some of our state mandated stormwater inspection requirements. So during these annual inspections, which are performed at every restaurant in town, the businesses are given guidance how to be compliant with the stormwater laws, but also are able to demonstrate how they've gone above and beyond to be eligible to become Clean Bay certified. So with this certification, they'll get a recognition by us. They'll get a decal they can put in their windows to proudly display to the public that they are Clean Bay certified. This requires meeting a number of additional criteria on our increasingly comprehensive checklist. So in addition to kind of the basics of proper trash disposal and material storage, best practices like organic waste recycling and sustainable procurement are also assessed. This year was a tricky one, of course. We performed most of the inspections right before the pandemic really got going. And then since then been thoughtfully scheduling the final inspections. So tonight we're applauding the environmental stewardship of 15 restaurants, although I would like to absolutely say thanks to all the restaurants for participating in the inspections. I mean, they all learn something and gain from this, and especially this year, of course, for everything they're doing. But these 15 in particular, we want to thank them for making a difference in the cleanliness of both Hermosa Beach and the Santa Monica Bay as a whole. So I will quickly go through the list, and we have a number of them on the Zoom, I believe. So as I read your name, if you are, please jump on, say hi, briefly tell us, how long you've been in Hermosa, and thank you again. So in alphabetical order, at 68 Pier Avenue, we have American Junkies. Anybody from there on the line? I don't believe so. Next, we have 3216 Manhattan Avenue, Brothers Burritos. Next, the Chipotle at 1439 PCH. It's Clean Bay certified. And do we have anybody from? I had some RSVPs, but you know how it goes. Okay. Next, at 1100 PCH, El Pollo Inca. And I'll keep going, but if you're on the line, please jump in. At 316 Pure Avenue, Frito Misto. 1200 PCH, we have Fusion Sushi. 238 Pure Avenue, Gumtree Cafe. Will and Lori, are you on tonight? All right. almost there. At 133 Hermosa Avenue, we have the Hermosa Beach Pie and Cake Company. And 425 Pier Avenue, Hook and Plow. At 1132 Hermosa Avenue, we have Paisano's Pizza and Pasta. At 39 Pier Avenue, Palmia Restaurant. 50 Pier Avenue, Patrick Malloy's. 509 Pier Avenue, The Source Cafe.
I'm the first.
Yeah, all right. Welcome.
Hey,
Hi, I'm the CFO, Beth Hanneman from the Source Cafe. Amber Cottle, our chef, and Cindy Van Pelt couldn't join us. They're baking all the Thanksgiving goodies for our community right now. But thank you guys for being supporters and looking forward to seeing you guys take out at the Source and outdoor patio when we're open, and also our new location in Manhattan Beach on 9th and Sepulveda.
Cool. Thank you very much. And next we have 308 Pier Avenue, Sugar Dane. And then lastly, 1100 PCH, good old Trader Joe's. So again, congratulations to all of you. Thanks you for participating and shop local, everyone.
and thank you, Doug. And let me just say, we have a lot of modest business owners that were recognized, and we are a beach community. Our quality of life is totally dependent on a clean beach. That's why we all live here. It also is what draws visitors. The commitment that our businesses have made to making the steps to get this certification to protect our beach is something that I think the community recognizes and celebrates. And so I certainly have been a patron at most of the establishments you ticked off, and I will take a look at the list and make sure I patronize the rest. And specifically with respect to Beth showing up, I think the Source has some of the finest coffee in town, as well as some of the best food and sort of to-go items, as well as a terrific atmosphere. So thank you for your commitment to not only clean water, but for the service you provide to the community. And I look forward to coming back in as soon as possible and patronizing the Source. So with that, I will just make a quick last call. If there's anybody who was recognized who couldn't get your phone unmuted in time, but now wants to be recognized. Okay, hearing none. Thank you all again. Thank you, Doug. Mr. City Clerk, what is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 7C. Hermosa Beach Kiwanis Club presents check to the city of Hermosa Beach. And I'd like to turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor, or if you'd like, I can go ahead and announce the people that are joining us tonight from the Kiwanis Club.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Eddie. I do have a list. I see Glenn Menard on my list. I see our old friend George Barks on our list, as well as two others, Michael Bell and Paul Amarias. So let me first turn it over to Glenn, if you would like to speak first, or you probably want to make sure George speaks last, because you might not get a word in edgewise if you let him go first. But
thank you, Mayor.
anyway.
The behind George Barks's head there, if you can get away from the shine, that is a replica check that we had made. You can't cash it; it's too big. But the clock on pier was put there by the Kiwanis Club, and since it hasn't been working recently, we decided to step up and spend over $7,000 to give to you to have the clock repaired, and so it's always on time. And I think the citizens really enjoyed it. We put a notice on one of the local websites and got 300 likes and 45 comments just by saying the clock's fixed. So we're glad that we could do that for the community.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. George, we always make fun of you. Go ahead, your turn.
Well, good evening, Mayor Massey and members of the City Council and city staff. As president of the Hermosa Beach Kiwanis Club this year, Glenn already explained, the check. Now, I don't know what he's saying. It's too big.
How's Jet?
Is Lorraine here?
Mr. Mayor, I'm willing to help you carry this check to the bank. I would like to tell you that we are mailing the check to you on Friday. Okay, and I want to thank the city staff for working with us.
Pushed it, but it didn't.
Because they really went out of their way.
Not working.
And I don't know who's talking here.
All right. We have some folks who we can hear. Okay, I think they're muted again. Go ahead, George.
Okay. And without, their support, we wouldn't have been able to get this clock fixed. We donated the clock to the city for the centennial in 2007. And many residents kept telling us, George, and other members of the Kiwanis, this clock doesn't keep accurate time. And we found out that the clock was problematic since day one. And now with the help of the city staff and a new, parts provider and a new sign company, it is working. And okay, so the other thing I want to make an announcement tonight. As you know, we have this annual tree lot fundraiser on the east lawn of the community center. And many residents of the community really don't know what we do. And I would just like to briefly remind everybody that we really need them to purchase their tree. And we are going to be complying with the county, the city, and the state, and the CDC guidelines to really make sure that they're going to be safe in picking up the tree. And just briefly, Mayor Massey, sponsored youth is one of our main focus areas of service, and we donate approximately $80,000 annually to Hermosa and the local communities. And we couldn't do this without this major fundraiser. I know we've been criticized in the past that we're making too much money, but it all goes back to the community. And just briefly, in Hermosa Beach, for example, the Historical Society Museum, we've donated to them, the Art Walk, the South Park design, scholarships for Maricosta and Redondo Union High School students, and also Circle K, El Camino College. Community center improvements. We actually spent $50,000 to help the city make those improvements. The Veterans Memorial, lighting and repairs. And just now, since the pandemic, we have spent $10,000 COVID-19 relief to local businesses and food banks. And this is how we can continue to do this, by having a fundraiser like this. And earlier, you mentioned Harbor Interfaith, and that is another charity that we make donations to. Now, Glenn, is there anything I'm missing here?
Well, I just wanted to comment that in these tough times, I think the tree lot brings us a little bit closer to a little normalcy. Again, every year the lot puts out hundreds of trees, and it's kind of a morale builder this year, I think, for the citizens of the community. And so we fought hard to make sure it happened with all the restrictions that we were facing when it was time to pull the trigger and buy those trees. We didn't know what the regulations were going to be for sure, but we took that leap of faith. And so we'll be giving out, as George said, some $80,000 in aid and scholarship, and it all comes from the tree lot. Thank you.
Mayor Massey, you mentioned, I think, Mike Bell or Paul Amaryllis. Would they like to say anything?
Sure. Mike and Paul, if you have anything to add, please do.
They're running the tree lot this year, and so that's what. And of course, Mike Bell does a lot of work with the city and all the major events. So if you have his number, you might want to call it to order a tree. Tree lot opens Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. It opens Friday.
Terrific. Glenn and George, thank you so much, not only for the tree lot, the other contributions to the community, refurbishing the clock tower, which I'm sure is going to be well appreciated. I will certainly take note of it next time I'm down at Pier Plaza. hope Kiwanis gets attribution for that refurbishment on the clock tower itself or otherwise. And thanks, as always, for working through our shared challenges on coordinating the tree lot and everything else that we've been working through over the past 12 to 18 months. So thank you both for being here. Thanks specifically for the clock tower. And we look forward to seeing you down at the tree lot.
You're welcome, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Have a happy, healthy, safe Thanksgiving. Okay.
Mr. City Clerk. Oh, I apologize. Councilmember Frangari.
I'm sorry, Justin. I was just saying, waving bye to George. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Do any of my colleagues have anything they wish to add? Seeing none. Mr. City Clerk, what's next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, that takes us to item 7D, proclamation declaring November 30th through December 6th, 2020 as United Against Hate Week in Hermosa Beach. And I turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor, to introduce our guest.
Terrific. Our friend Karen Klink, welcome.
Hi.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about LA versus hate, this collective effort by all of us to stand together for inclusion?
Well, I'm here because I am, I want to thank you guys first, Mayor Massey and the City of Hermosa for having me here and allowing me, and also to LA versus Hate for allowing me to speak on their behalf. I'm a member of the Racial Equity Committee of South Bay Cares, and we are partnering with LA versus Hate, which is a program of the LA County Commission for Human Relations. So we got involved kind of because Chief LeBaron, interesting story, reached out to me wondering if there was a local group that could help and support of residents that were involved in maybe hate incidents that maybe didn't rise to the level of crimes, bullying, that kind of a thing. And so I, as a member of South Bay Care, started looking into that, and we didn't, there are large nonprofits that, dabble in that area, but not anything in the area. And then as we were looking, LA versus Hate came up with 211, come up with this idea where you could call into 211 and they have like anonymous helpline to connect you with help, whether it's legal help, whether it's support, mental support, or whatever you need. And then they also would be keeping track of these incidents that are going on because there's been such a rise of hate incidents lately because of what's going on, what's been going on in the last few months. So that's sort of how I got involved in that. And so November 30th to December 6th, they are having a United Against Hate Week, which has gone on in other areas, but I believe it's Los Angeles first. And we have a lot of, virtual things, social media, and a lot of, we're trying to promote it. So we're happy that Hermosa is joining us. So I wanted to thank Hermosa Beach for supporting the LA versus Hate United Against Hate Week, which does run from November 30th to December 6th. And it's a wonderful opportunity to join with the rest of LA County against hate, and an important signal to the entire Hermosa Beach community and South Bay that all are welcome, all are enough, and all are safe here. So we're looking forward to it. We're really excited about it. And we hope that Hermosa will join us in that. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen. In a moment, I'll read a proclamation. I just wanted to provide a touch of context to the concept of hate. It's something that I think we're familiar with, but we might not be fully familiar with the details as it relates to something like uniting against hate, or as a region saying LA versus hate. According to the Department of Justice, that is the Federal Department of Justice, the term hate can be misleading. When used in a hate crime law, the word hate does not mean rage, anger, or general dislike. It means bias against people or groups with specific characteristics. At the federal level, hate crime laws include crimes committed on the basis of the victim's perceived or actual race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. With that context, let me read the proclamation joining the city of Hermosa Beach, united against hate with our neighbors throughout LA County. Whereas the Constitution of the United States confers equality on all individuals, regardless of race, gender, orientation, or political beliefs. And whereas Los Angeles County is home to a diverse population of more than 10 million residents, including white, Latinx, Black, Asian Pacific Islander, and American Indians and Alaska Natives, among others. The inaugural LA versus Hate United Against Hate Week, November 30th to December 6th of 2020, will celebrate the county's diverse history, culture, and traditions, while educating county residents on the importance of standing together against racism, prejudice, and bigotry in all its forms, while supporting social justice, inclusion, and safety for all. And whereas the city of Hermosa Beach joins other communities in California and cities across LA County in supporting the inaugural LA versus Hate United Against Hate Week, November 30th through December 6th, as an important step in bridging divisions and strengthening our communities. And whereas during this week, we will not only celebrate the legacy and culture of the diverse populations that make up Los Angeles County, but also acknowledge the challenges that they have faced and continue to face in those communities. And whereas Hermosa Beach is committed to strengthening partnerships to overcome hate and help address hardships faced by victims of hate crimes, and finding ways to elevate every community in the unique ways they make the city a better, more inclusive, and welcoming place to live. Now, therefore, I, Justin Massey, Mayor of the City of Hermosa Beach, California, do hereby proclaim the week of November 30th through December 6th, 2020, as United Against Hate Week in the City of Hermosa Beach, and I invite everyone to visit www.laversushate.org. That's lavshate.org to find resources and remind your friends and family of the importance of standing up to hate in our community and beyond, dated this day of November 24th, 2020. So Karen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much
for being with us. Let me now turn to my colleagues or the city manager to see if they have anything they wish to add. Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Massey. I just want to say a couple quick things. One is something I just ran across. I believe it was just yesterday. I don't recall where, but California and the LA region in particular have one of the most diverse religious communities, diverse more than many, many other places. And I wanted to tip a hat and add that. And I think this is great at the end of the calendar year in such a busy and distracting year. There's been a lot of focus on these issues, but there's been a lot of other huge issues as well, as we all know. And nice to cue this up, to resurface all of that energy that has been focused and brought to light the problems that we have around this issue as we head into very soon a new calendar year where we hopefully can all turn a page. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Mayor Massey.
Thank you, Mary. Any others on the council wishing to add comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll just close by again thanking Karen and letting folks out there who might be watching know that regardless of where you come from or who you are, you have a place here in the city of Hermosa Beach and you are welcome here. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Mr. City Clerk.
That takes us to item 8, the city manager's report, and I'll turn it over to Madam City Manager Suja Lowenthal to provide her updates on the items listed as 8A and 8B.
Welcome, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. And just wanted to start off with a COVID-19 update. We heard from our partners at Beach Cities Health District, but some of the information definitely is worth repeating. This week, as we heard, has brought more challenges to all of us as new COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations continue to rise at alarming rates in Los Angeles County and across the state. This has been troubling and disappointing news because of the increased risk to the health of our community and our economy and the potential impact on our children returning to the classroom. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Health's reporting of record numbers of new COVID-19 diagnoses in recent days led to an amended public health order that goes into effect at 10 p.m. tomorrow. The order seeks to reduce the possibility for crowding and the potential for exposures in settings where people are not wearing their face coverings. It will eliminate all in-person dining at restaurants, breweries, wineries, and bars in Los Angeles County. That includes Hermosa Beach restaurants, breweries, and bars. Restaurants, breweries, and bars would only be able to offer takeout, drive-through, and delivery services. Wineries and breweries may continue their retail operations by adhering to current protocols. In-person dining will not be allowed for at least the next 3 weeks. I wanted to take a moment, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, to thank Supervisor Hahn. She has been incredibly generous with her time to hear concerns from our businesses as well as taking our calls. We listened into the board meeting and she did make an effort to provide some relief to our restaurants. And as a member of the staff and your staff, I certainly wanted to thank her for representing our cities and our region's best interests in the compromise measures she attempted to have passed in the board. What we also know, which was also mentioned earlier, is that Pasadena has its own health department, so it has chosen to keep its outdoor dining open at this time, but it is also said it's continuing to closely monitor the data and may reconsider this decision. Hermosa Beach does not have its own health department, and our businesses rely on licenses from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health to operate. That means our businesses risk citation or revocation of licenses from public health if they choose to ignore the public health orders. This is truly disheartening for all of our local businesses. Our restaurants and city staff have worked diligently to offer outdoor dining to protect the public's health during the pandemic. The restaurant owners have invested in outdoor decks, heaters, and other facilities to meet the public health order that required outdoor dining. And many of them have stocked up on food in anticipation of the long Thanksgiving weekend. If you have the means, please help support our local restaurants by ordering food to go or for delivery. You may also wish to consider purchasing gift cards to help them pay their staff. We have also asked the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors to make financial aid available to our small businesses from the CARES Act funding they have received from the federal government. We will share that information with our businesses and information about any funding that becomes available for local businesses. Recent alarming increases in COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations are reminders that we must all do our part to slow the rapid spread of COVID-19. Los Angeles County Public Health announced yesterday that another safer at home order is being considered because the county has surged past the 5-day average of 4,500 new COVID-19 cases per day in just 1 week. We do not yet know for certain what that order will say, but at the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors meeting today, public health officials discussed that the new order may include closing outdoor playgrounds again, which we know is very important to our local families, and prohibiting public gatherings of non-household members, as well as other restrictions. The best way to support our businesses and school reopenings is for each of us to take immediate action and personally commit to diligently follow the public health precautions, which include wearing a face covering every time you leave home, avoiding gathering with people, and avoid non-essential trips outside your home. Staying home when you are ill or if you have been exposed to COVID-19, getting your flu immunization, washing your hands frequently, quarantining for 14 days if you have been in crowds of people without face coverings or engaged in other risky behaviors. We can also adopt new traditions for this year's Thanksgiving celebrations. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Health is asking everyone to rethink their Thanksgiving plans because of the dangerous surge in COVID-19 cases. The department is asking us to celebrate with just our immediate household members and to gather online, saying this is the best way to prevent spreading the virus. If you do see your friends or family members in person, please observe public health's earlier recommendations by meeting outside, limiting the duration of your time together to 2 hours or less, and limiting the number of people involved to no more than 15 from no more than 3 households. While this is not the way we wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving, celebrating virtually and with the appropriate precautions will help us get our businesses and schools reopened and ensure that we can celebrate Thanksgiving with all of our friends and family members next year and years to come. I'd also like to provide an update, a little bit of good news on our superintendent recruitment. As you know, we have had a vacancy in Public Works for superintendent for almost a year. We are happy to announce that we have made an offer for the superintendent position with Public Works. John Cordova will be returning to the city and bringing with him 16 years of experience. John has continued to advance his career through his recent position with the City of Vernon, as well as his continued efforts to expand his expertise by pursuing many educational opportunities. Prior to working for the City of Vernon, John worked for the City of Hermosa Beach for 13 years. He has both supervisory and hands-on experience across the many facets of operations and maintenance. John is scheduled to begin the week of December 7th and stated that he is super excited to return to the city that he knows and that he loves. I'd like to take this moment to thank our Public Works Director, Marnell Gibson, who's not here today, but Marnell has definitely been doing double duty without a superintendent. I'd like to thank the Public Works crew for their patience and all of their hard work during this time while we were recruiting to fill this very important vacancy. Also, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to provide an update on a Safer Prospect project and upcoming virtual community meeting. City staff continues to work with the community and consulting team to evaluate traffic safety concerns and develop concepts to consider as part of a temporary demonstration project for Prospect Corridor. To date, staff has held a project kickoff meeting in January 2020, a community meeting in July 2020, and has coordinated an online community survey which closed on September 30th, 2020. With community input from previous meetings, data collected from the community survey and analysis of the corridor, including speed, traffic volume, and traffic collision data, and field observations, city staff and the consulting team have worked to develop a series of draft concepts for further discussion and consideration with the community. The draft concepts can be found on the project webpage on the city's website and will be the focus of an upcoming community meeting to be held virtually on December 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Following the community meeting, the project team will refine the concepts and select up to 3 locations along the corridor for final consideration by the Public Works Commission and the City Council in January 2021. Final approval of the concepts will include additional detailed engineering designs and information about the materials recommended for use at each demonstration location. Physical implementation of the demonstration concepts is expected to occur in March and be in place through June to allow time for the community and project team to test, evaluate, and provide feedback on the demonstration elements and determine their effectiveness and addressing the key safety concerns expressed by the community for this corridor. Please do visit the project webpage to learn more and to RSVP for the upcoming virtual meeting. Lastly, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'd like to invite an update from our city delegate to the Los Angeles County West Vector and Vector-Borne Disease Control District Board of Trustees. Before I ask Mr. Fasola to provide his update as the city's delegate to the LA County West Vector and Vector-Borne Disease Control District, I'd like to share that staff has attached an information item which responds to 2 concerns that Mr. Fasola has mentioned in the past during his updates to the council. His first concern is how the city operates the storm drains at the beach. And the second concern is the requirement for sump pits for private development and the potential that both concerns have for allowing an environment that would support an increase in the mosquito population. Due to the sandy soils that are typical in Hermosa Beach, infiltration of water occurs regularly under both scenarios, thus reducing the potential for standing water for extended periods of time. The city storm drain outlets are managed for a rainy season and a dry season. During the dry season, which is May through October, the city fills in the drainage path and covers the outlets to create a more even surface along the beach. Any flows that may enter into the storm drain are typically small and would then infiltrate into the sand. The sump pits are a water quality design requirement. The pits or boxes are required to have a perforated bottom to allow for infiltration into the sandy soils. Mr. Fasola's last update to the City Council was on July 28th, 2020, and we appreciate that he is able to attend this evening to provide another update. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Fasola if he's available.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can, Jim. Welcome.
Hello, Mayor and council members. You want me to dive right in and just tell you what's going on?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, the good news is that West Vector, which is the western part, it covers the western part of Los Angeles County, has been providing normal mosquito abatement services throughout the pandemic. And that's not the case with some of the other districts. But the West Vector has been able to do everything that they normally do. Also, I'd say that low rainfall this year has probably helped keep mosquito problems in check. The bad news is that the new mosquito that was introduced to Los Angeles about 8 years ago has finally made it to Hermosa Beach this year. And it's not a disease vector, but it is a very annoying mosquito because it bites all day long. So that is something that is going to be probably in Hermosa Beach forever. It's never been eradicated from any city it's gotten to. So that is something that is on the horizon. As Sujim mentioned, I brought up two, I actually worked with the director of West Vector about what are the issues in Hermosa Beach. And I sort of lumped it in with Manhattan Beach because we have the same topography and the same sort of problems. We have about 2 to 3 times higher call rate for mosquito problems than the rest of the district. And we should be lower because we have sandy soil and we don't have, so we don't get very much ponding water. We don't have swimming pools, like abandoned swimming pools are very rare, are almost, I've never even heard of one around here. So we don't have some of the big sources that most areas do have. And so why do we have such a high rate of calls and mosquito problems? And the two things that the district came up with are the beach storm drains and the sump pits and drain boxes that are around town. I know that some of the beach drains, which is just a maintenance problem, the beach drains were cleared out. There were a couple I checked today. There were a couple that were clogged up on 26th Street and 6th Street. There may not be a problem now because it hasn't rained for a while. But I assume those can be cleaned. So that's not really a permanent problem. Vector, I asked Vector to provide a map and a list of where we're getting our mosquito problems. And so they put together a map of where they've been calling. Let's see, dividing our city into 3 different districts and what the calls were and where they found mosquitoes breeding. So since July, there were only 10 calls where they could determine where the mosquitoes were actually breeding. 8 of those were in sump pits and box drains, which are almost the same thing. They're pits underground or on just below grade level, and 2 were in containers, which might be a rain barrel, might be a fountain or a bird bath. It could be anything. So 80% of the problem, at least this year, since summer, has been sump pits and drain boxes. So there are, Public Works does have their standards to how these sump pits are supposed to be built. And they do have drains in the bottom. And there is a maintenance agreement that homeowners need to sign now that stating that they will maintain the drainage systems on their properties. However, it's still a problem, definitely a problem. It is very hard to keep sump pits clear. They clog all the time. And if you have 5 or 10 pits on your property, it's very hard to know that one may be clogged up. And so that may be something that we want to look into more. But overall, I'd say that the major problem this last year is sump pits, and I'll leave it at that and maybe take questions.
All right, thank you, Jim. Do any of my colleagues have questions? I have a question, Jim, that my wife would probably kill me if I didn't ask, and that is, given that there's this new annoying mosquito that's moved into Hermosa Beach, what can homeowners do to minimize the likelihood that those mosquitoes will breed around their house?
So one of the problems with the new mosquito, the mosquito we've had in Los Angeles for many years is a pretty big mosquito called a Culex mosquito. And they need a pretty sizable container of water to lay their eggs. And they're also good flyers, and they only bite at night. Or I shouldn't say only, they generally bite in the early morning and late in the evening and at night. This new mosquito, the Aedes mosquito, is a smaller mosquito. It bites all day long. It bites normally multiple bites, maybe 4 or 5 bites at a time, and it generally goes for people's ankles. The problem is it can breed in something very small, like a bottle cap worth of water. And even if that dries out, the eggs will live for about 2 years. So all it needs is more water sometime in that 2 years for the eggs to mature into mosquitoes. So the key thing is to not have standing water in your yard, in the rain gutters, or anywhere. That is the key.
Good to know. That's excellent information. Thank you. Any additional questions from council? Madam City Manager, any final comments?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Fasola for his service. He is always very informative and really thorough when he comes back to council with his information. And for most of us, it's something that we don't ever have to think about. And it's because people at Vector Control and individuals such as Mr. Fasola take great interest. So I want to thank him just from the staff side.
Well, thank you, Suja.
And I'll echo that, Jim. I find your reports to be enormously informative and concise, and I appreciate the time you take to not only attend the meetings of the district, but also to develop a relationship with the administrators of the district and also pass that information along to not only our city staff, but also to the public at these meetings. So thank you very much for the time you've taken and how you distill the information in a way that's usable for us.
Well, I never thought I'd spend so much time thinking about mosquitoes, but there it is. It's a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Have a happy Thanksgiving, Jim.
Thank you. Bye, Justin.
Mr. City Clerk.
That takes us to item 9 of the agenda, public participation, oral and written communications. So with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and set up our public participation before moving on to a motion to file and receive our written communication.
Please do, and I assume you'll give the standard explanation to folks about the nature of this public participation.
Yes, sir. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My apologies. Okay. So although the City Council values your comments, the Brown Act generally prohibits the council from acting on any matter not listed on the posted agenda as a business item. This is the time for members of the public to address the council on any items within the council's jurisdiction, not on this agenda or items on this agenda. Please note that the city council does not engage in a dialogue during public comment, and each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If you are joining the meeting by phone, please remember to dial *6 in order to unmute yourself. And participants joining us by internet, please remember to unmute yourself before starting your comment. And we ask all speakers to please state your full name before or on the record before starting your comment. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Eddie. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for waiting through our preliminary agenda items. Now is your chance to address the council. So if you are on Zoom, please raise your hand on Zoom so the city clerk can call you in order. And if you are on the phone, you will dial *6, state your name, and then you can give comment. If more than one person does that, then we may have to just order things, but you'll all get a chance to address the council. So with that, Eddie, do we have anybody whose hand is raised on Zoom?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. We have Laura Pina. And Laura, if you would like for me to turn on your camera, I would just promote you to a panelist. Or if you prefer not to use your camera, I can have the 3-minute clock running as you speak. What is your preference?
I'm fine with just speaking. It's good.
Welcome, Laura.
Great.
Thanks. My name is Laura Pena. I want to thank the staff for preparing the ordinance to allow the creation of the outdoor speakers. A few weeks ago, I was dining in one of these decks that had light ambient music. And for me, not only was the food amazing, but the light ambient music transported me to a lighter, brighter time, even if it was just for a moment. And a week later, I dined at the same place, same excellent food, but the music was gone. It felt different, just not the same festive atmosphere that I experienced the week before. Now, many would think this is a moot issue, considering that the Board of Supervisors' decision today to ban outdoor dining. And in the same vein, since I'm only halfway done decorating our business outside with ribbons and lights so the patrons in these outdoor decks can enjoy it, why should I continue? But I think that is the point. We must continue. Hopefully this ban will only last 3 weeks, ending right before Christmas. It would be great to have this ordinance in place so we can provide light ambient music for all our diners once these decks are open again. Now, as I understand as council members, there isn't much you can do about the reopening of these dining decks since we fall under LA County. The request to ask for variance is filled with obstacles since we have no public health officials. I understand, but here is something you do have the power to do. You can show our local restaurants and community members that you see how much they enjoy these outdoor dining experiences. With music, it will further help change the energy in our city, one to which we will get through this together. And in doing so, I ask you to pass this ordinance and allow it to stay in effect as long as we have these outdoor dining decks. Let Hermosa Beach become a city that welcomes music and embraces these transporting channels that can brighten our lives. Even though we are part of Los Angeles County, we do not have to become a city of fear. Instead, let's reinforce that we are a city of angels who will come together and support each other. As a business owner, I feel the support from our community, and I want to thank each and every one of our community members for their support. And I want to thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you, Laura. Mr. City Clerk, do we have anybody else on Zoom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have Gilbert with his hand raised. Gilbert, are you there? And would you like me to promote you to panelist so you can take advantage of your camera?
I'm here and I prefer just to speak.
Understood. Please state your full name for the record and you can begin your comment.
Okay, I'm Gilbert David Orozco. I'm the owner of La Peñita restaurant there in Hermosa Beach. We've been there for 41 years. And now at the moment, we're in a crisis of our landlord wants to evict us. And I've heard that there's a proposal to see if I could get more time so I can adjust to what I need to do as far as maybe relocating or preferably there in Hermosa. And basically that's where I think that proposal, if it happens to go through, it'll benefit me, my business, and my employees and everybody else that's there with us. So that's basically what I wanted to say. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Gilbert. We have your comment. One or more of the council members may follow up with city staff after the public comment period is closed. And if we do have questions for you, we always can call you back, even though typically that's not the process. But thank you for your comment. Mr. City Clerk, do we have other commenters waiting to participate via Zoom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have John with his hand raised. John, would you like me to approve or to promote you to panelist so you can utilize your camera, or would you prefer to remain off camera?
Voice only is fine.
Okay, John, if you could please state your full name for the record and go ahead and begin your comment.
Absolutely. My name is John David, and I just want to thank you guys for putting this outdoor speakers and the outdoor dining decks ordinance up for discussion here. Unfortunately, today the county closed down the restaurants for 3 weeks. You know, I don't know if they'll open up in 3 weeks, but whenever they do open up, they're really going to need our help. As you, I'm sure, can imagine, it's quite tough on them. So I just want to suggest that you do move forward with this temporary ordinance, whether you could pass it tonight or kick it down. I really think you should consider this, and I think we can do this so it helps the restaurants. We can do it so the residents are happy because you can create sound limitations. You know, I suggest something like, you know, a limitation where the music would not be audible unless, you know, beyond, say, 50 feet, must stop at 10 o'clock, or even the city can provide a list of very low wattage Bluetooth speakers so that, you know, can get in Amazon, but at least you're not going to have problems enforcing it, but it will allow the music. So I just want to, you know, suggest that you move forward with that. I think it's a very important thing to create a great ambiance downtown and help our businesses get through this. So, one last thing is I do suggest, instead of just doing it for the holidays, if you can do it with these limitations, just have it sunset when the dining decks, you know, leave, because, you know, the whole point of all this stuff is to help the businesses and create an ambiance and a place where they can succeed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Eddie, do we have other commenters on Zoom?
I don't see any additional raised hands, Mr. Mayor. So if you'd like to just open it up for anyone who is joining us that would like to participate, I think that would be a good idea.
All right, I will do so. If you're on Zoom, you can still raise your hand and be recognized and give comment. And if you're joining us by phone, please press *6, state your name, and we will take your comment. Okay. Do we have anybody who's raised their hands, Eddie?
I do not see anyone else with their hand raised, Mr. Mayor. So I think it's safe to say that we can proceed with closing public comment.
Okay, thank you. Seeing and hearing no additional comment, I will close public comment. Thank you all. And Eddie, I believe that takes us to the written communications.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. So we did receive 2 written communications from Mr. Tony Higgins. So at this point, I do recommend the council provide a motion to file and receive the written communications.
All right, thank you, Eddie. Do I have a motion from my colleagues?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to receive and file the written communications. Is there any discussion? Okay, just one quick check, Mr. City Attorney. This particular vote is not one that we take public comment on, I presume, correct?
So, Mayor, it's been our practice to either invite the author of the written communication to speak now, or the author can speak during public comments, either way.
All right. And so for this particular vote, shall I invite the speaker to provide comment or reopen public comment just for this vote? Or was the public comment period that we just closed what you had in mind?
I would ask if he has additional comments regarding his written communication.
All right. Thank you, Mike. All right, with that, both of the written communications are from Tony Higgins, one of our residents. Mr. Higgins, if you are participating by phone or on Zoom, we are open to your input on the receive and file motion. So please step forward and raise your hand on Zoom or press *6 on your phone if you are participating. All right, hearing none from Mr. Higgins, I will close public comment on this vote. And I will ask the city clerk to call the roll on this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato,
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy,
Aye.
and Mayor Massey.
Aye.
The item is approved and the written communication is filed and received.
All right. Mr. City Clerk, thank you. And what is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 10 on the agenda, City Council member comments. And I would like to just briefly preface this item before we move on to the council members' comments. So council members may briefly respond to public comments, may ask a question for clarification, or make a brief announcement, or report on his or her own activities or meetings attended. And as part of item 10, we have item 10A, updates from City Council ad hoc subcommittees and standing committee delegates. So you can go ahead and, as you make your comment, and proceed to provide any updates that you would like to for any ad hoc subcommittees or standing committees.
Thank you, Eddie. So let me open it up to my colleagues. Do any of my colleagues have any comments that they wish to make? Or any announcements? Okay. I do have a quick question for Madam City Manager and Mr. City Attorney. With respect to Mr. Orozco's comment regarding La Peñita restaurant and an apparent landlord-tenant dispute, council received an email on that. I assume what Mr. Orozco is referring to on our agenda tonight is the item related to the eviction moratorium for commercial tenants.
That's correct. That item is on your agenda tonight, a little bit later on.
Okay.
Under municipal matters, it would be item C under municipal matters, item 14. So that item directly addresses the comment and the letter.
Okay, terrific. And thank you, Mike. And I know the item regarding outdoor speakers for the dining decks is also on our agenda. So let me now just poll my colleagues to see whether anybody has any updates from any of our committees, either standing committees or ad hoc committees. Does anybody want to give any updates in that regard? All right. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the privilege of attending the Los Angeles County Sanitation District meeting. It was the first one, very interesting. We did update some financial policies, but overall it was a joint meeting with another district. So a lot of familiar faces in the room. And as I said, very entertaining. And definitely they touched on, with going back to COVID, that they're examining the wastewater and they're actually able to track COVID spread through the wastewater, which I know that we've talked about in the past, but that was an eye-opening learning experience for me, and looking forward to attending more in the future. After, of course, Mr. Mayor can't attend, of course, so.
I am looking forward to you attending more of the sanitation district meetings, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'm glad that you found it productive. It is important stuff. So I'm glad that it was a happy occasion for you. Any additional comment from any of my colleagues? All right, hearing none. Mr. City Clerk, what is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 11, consent calendar. And this is the time where the City Council will be providing a motion to either approve the entirety of the consent calendar, or they can go ahead and pull any items that they would like to address separately.
Terrific. Thank you, Eddie. Do any of my colleagues have items that they wish to pull from consent? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Campbell, thank you. Okay. And Mr. City Attorney, is this an item that we open for public comment?
We generally take comment on the consent calendar under public comments.
I actually believe that's in the instructions. They can, for public participation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a note that that we should clarify that a little bit, because what we do is what we say is if something is removed, then people can comment on the removed item separately. Otherwise, the idea is that they comment on items not removed during public comments. But I think that Eddie and I will work a little bit on these instructions to make that a little bit clearer in the future.
Yeah, that would be terrific. If we were clear with the public that the general public participation is their opportunity to comment on the consent calendar, that would facilitate our vote on the consent calendar and our process to get to the rest of the agenda.
Yeah.
All right. With that, given the fact that that instruction is not yet on our agenda, I will go ahead and open this matter up to a public comment. If anybody would like to comment on the consent calendar, now is your opportunity to do so by either raising your hand on Zoom or dialing *6 on your phone and stating your name. Mr. City Clerk, do we have any raised hands on Zoom?
I see no hands raised, Mr. Mayor, and I have no one listed requesting to speak on any of the consent items.
All right. Last call for public comment on the consent calendar. Seeing and hearing no one, I will close public comment on the consent calendar. We have a motion in a second. Is there any further discussion or questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. City Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato.
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy.
Aye.
And Mayor Massey.
Aye.
The consent calendar is approved by unanimous consent.
Thank you, Eddie. What is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 12, since there were no items removed, we're going to go ahead and forego part 12 of the agenda and go directly into item 13, public hearings. And again, this normally would be the time where we do public hearings, but since we have none here as well, we'll go right into item 14, municipal matters. So that takes us to item 14A, receive verbal report on emergency enforcement measures to ensure compliance with pandemic-related health orders from both City and County of Los Angeles Health Department. And we have Madam City Manager Suja Lowenthal and Police Chief Paul LeBaron here to present on this.
Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, we wanted to provide a verbal update to you on the status of enforcement as it relates to COVID-19 health orders and protocols. You've heard from a couple of sources, Beach City's Health District, myself, and then your own notifications that you receive, the changes that took place today. So I'd like to invite Chief LeBaron to share with us where we are with enforcement and how we plan to incorporate these new changes. Chief LeBaron.
Thank you very much, Madam City Manager and Mayor Massey, members of the City Council. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak regarding the enforcement measures that we are involved with to ensure the compliance of the pandemic-related health orders. So this week has been very challenging for everybody, and we acknowledge that with the rise of cases and the concerns that have been expressed, not only by our community, but our businesses as well, and we've heard about them in tonight's meeting. The police department shares those concerns of the council and our community, and we are working very hard to provide the appropriate levels of enforcement while doing what we can to keep our employees on the front lines safe from infection. The Hermosa Beach Police Department is involved in conversations with our neighboring cities, as well as all the police departments in LA County about the role of law enforcement in this pandemic. At this time, we've given our employees direction to proactively respond to groups and gatherings that are in public places where social distancing and mask wearing is not being observed. And over the past weekend, officers did receive calls related to activities that were involved in failure to social distance and not wearing masks. Our officers were able to respond and break up gatherings in the downtown area as well as the beaches that involved teenagers that were consuming alcohol. And so that is something that we've been working to try and eliminate. As we move forward, we're looking at our staffing models to ensure we do not expose our employees to unnecessary exposures with others. As we heard, the workplace is a very dangerous place for exposures to happen. We're utilizing a disinfectant procedure for our vehicles that's been very effective in giving our employees peace of mind that they are working in a clean space. And we also recognize that the public presence in areas where gatherings are likely to take place is important. So in order for us to provide a more visible presence in these areas, we will be deploying the additional health order enforcement officers that are going to serve as a visible reminder for compliance. I know the last council meeting, we had temporarily held off on using them. We feel this is a very good time to bring them back to be able to help us with having that visibility and being able to remind people of what the important things are our medical professionals are telling us. And I just want to take a minute, in addition to the health order related activities, to just talk about what the police department continues to do in regards to crime enforcement. We are remaining very proactive investigations related to crimes within our city. We're currently seeing an increase in property related crimes, specifically the targeting of bicycles that are left unsecured and delivery items that have been ordered online and left on people's porches and in open areas. I want to remind everybody to please keep your valuables secured. Do not leave items visible in your vehicles or on porches. And if you see someone acting suspicious, please don't think twice about calling 911 to report it. The police department is using our Instagram and Facebook accounts to share current trends and remind our community of how to protect their homes from crime. I would encourage everybody to sign up and follow us and share that same information with your neighbors. Mayor Massey, this does at this time conclude my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have before turning it over to Ken Robertson.
Thank you, Chief. I'll hold questions at this point and let the director make his comments, and then I'll call for questions from council. If he's ready, since he may need a little bit more time to get on the screen. There he is.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I really did not plan to have any comments tonight. I echo the Chief's sentiments about our enforcement posture and the difficult times we're facing. We've worked hard with our restaurant and business owners to comply with the order that just went into effect last Thursday, to work with them to reduce the capacity of their outdoor dining establishments. But now the next phase is they can't operate them. So it speaks to the challenges we're facing, but we are ready to work with the business owners again should in 3 weeks that we go through some different phase of the health orders. But that's all I have to add.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ken. Let me now turn to my colleagues. Do any of the council members have questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief and Director, for the report. This is a question for probably the city manager. I know on March 24th, during the first shutdown, we discussed suspending the encroachment fees for businesses. And I was just wondering if staff has discussed that moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We have not discussed it in that it is still in effect, and we haven't discussed bringing it back to council to reinstate at this time. It is a relief that I know that the businesses enjoy at this time, and so we're not requesting to bring that back to you just yet. We understand things are still quite difficult for our businesses.
So I guess that's part of my clarification. So the suspension of fees is still in effect?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments from council? All right. Chief and Ken, thank you for you and your staff's continued work to maximize compliance with the various health officer orders and our various city rules that are designed to keep our community safe. We got a presentation from Beach City's Health District at the beginning of our meeting, and the new case trajectory is pretty well vertical. It's straight up. The data, as Jacqueline Sun from Beach City's Health District said, are grim. And we all know in our community, there are a ton of people who are doing the right thing, wearing masks, maintaining social distance, even outdoors, and avoiding indoor gatherings. It's going to be critical that we continue to do that. And to the extent that, you know, I have input on the agenda, we as a council, or I as mayor, I'm going to make sure that we prioritize keeping our community safe. If we have areas that are recurring problems in terms of gatherings, we will take the requisite action to put our staff in position to maximize compliance with the COVID-19 orders so that we can keep our community safe and so that we can all return to social and economic activity as it was before the pandemic as soon as possible. And so with that, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Suja, for the report. Mr. City Clerk, what's next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 14B, consideration of a temporary suspension of Hermosa Beach Municipal Code regulation of outdoor stereo speakers at commercial establishments. And we have Madam City Manager Suja Lowenthal to provide this report.
Thank you, Mr. City Clerk, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. We had prepared this item with our city attorney in response to a request from our business community to be allowed to have outdoor ambient music during the holiday season. And so this item was prepared. And then of course we heard the news that restaurants would not be able to operate their outdoor dining area for 3 weeks. Initially, amongst the staff leadership team, we had a discussion about asking you to consider postponing this item until your first meeting in December. However, I would like to submit to you, and I think you've heard this from a couple of members of our community, that should you consider passing this tonight, it would at least give our businesses the option, should they wish to add the speakers to their outdoor dining area and to play music for perhaps people that are coming to pick up to-go items. And so I would like to still present this item to you for your consideration. You can determine whether you'd like to pass this tonight or bring it back when the restaurants are actually able to operate. But as you've heard from a couple of our folks, this might be a good option for people to push ahead and persevere. And despite having this obstacle placed before them, these are still holiday times, and a lot of how we get through this will depend on the level of optimism and spirit we have. And so I appreciate the comments made by the two speakers that spoke earlier, both Laura and John. It would be optimistic and uplifting if folks chose to go ahead and add those features should you decide to add the item. So this item particularly asks you to suspend the portion of our municipal ordinance that prohibits this sort of outdoor music with the use of speakers. And we have crafted this so that this would be applicable between the dates of November 25th through January 3rd of 2021. That would cover the entire holiday season. And with that, I can take questions. The city attorney is here as well to answer any questions you might have on this item.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. Before I get to Councilmember Campbell, am I correct, Madam City Manager? You were just indicating that the city attorney is here in case we have questions, not that the city attorney has anything to add to the staff report?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Massey. My question is there any more thought to the date being through the holiday season versus through the pilot of outdoor dining, which we know is quite a bit longer, more extended than January 3rd?
May I answer that?
Yes.
So initially, here's our thought. Allow this to take place during this time frame so that we can also just test to see how the neighborhood responds and that there aren't any issues. We don't anticipate any issues, but we do want to give ourselves the opportunity to observe how it's received and make sure that if there happen to be any problems with noise or the volume, that we can address that, and then we can come back to you to extend that.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, I have one quick follow-up that's related, if I may.
Please do.
Yeah, and that is, it seems to me this has, especially in recent years, become extremely common. And I know everybody's cities are laid out very differently and configured very differently in terms of relationship to residential areas, et cetera. But do we have any sort of intel about, best practices about where this has worked, how common it is? I know when I engage it, it's always quite delightful to have, that ambiance in place. It does add a lot in my view, but I don't know if that's anything that was included in your consideration about, sort of these kinds of trials or these kinds of practices. And I ask because I guess one of my questions will be about the, the term that we might consider.
Sure. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I will admit to you, most of us are not going out as much as we would like to. And so we don't have the personal experience with the different areas. We are aware that perhaps a handful of areas allow it, but we did not do extensive research on who does and who does not. And I'll share with you, in part because this is a very localized request. We're working with our businesses in a very localized manner. And so looking to a need that they had expressed to liven things up, we've been working with them for several weeks actually, with their input on what the holiday decorations could be like. And the sense that we have, and we've had for some time, is that people are craving this external validation that we are going to be okay. The holidays are amongst us. We want to encourage patrons to come because we are open for business. We're open in a little different way. And so we focus really more on our local businesses and what their request is, as opposed to seeing if this is universally done.
Great, thank you, understood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mary. Any other comments or questions from council members? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see it's mostly directed at dining decks. Would this also appeal to retail locations that would maybe want to draw people in and with the festive music?
I believe so. I don't think that we were restricting this to dining decks. Mr. City Attorney, could you help clarify that?
Yes. It was written to deal with dining decks. So that was what we had in mind. And section 2, which would suspend the prohibition on outdoor music, only applies to restaurants that offer on-site outdoor dining. So it would not apply to retail as written.
Maybe I can jump in here briefly to clarify. Most of our retailers are not operating outdoors. They haven't moved all of their equipment outdoors. And so they're still able to offer music from within their business, where they're probably more likely to already have speakers or the infrastructure, or maybe it's more secure from inside that it could be audible to draw people in, but not likely to have, this is really focused, the ordinance that we drafted was really focused on the dining decks because those are in the public right of way, separated from the business, the physical business front.
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Let me ask you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, are you interested in considering the expansion of this item to include outdoor speakers at retail establishments?
I think, is that discussion for after the public comment, or is that a conversation for now?
Okay, fair enough. Any additional comments or questions from council? Seeing and hearing none, let me move ahead and open up public comment on this item. If anybody is attending the meeting by Zoom or on their telephone and wishes to comment on this item, now is your opportunity to do so by either raising your hand on Zoom, or if you're on your cell phone, pressing *6. We'll typically, as we do, we'll start with the folks on Zoom. And so, Mr. City Clerk, is there anyone raising their hand on Zoom to provide public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not see any members of the public with their hands raised at this time. So again, if there are any members of the public that would like to provide public comment for this item, this would be the opportune time to go ahead and unmute yourself using *6 or raising your virtual hand as the mayor so kindly instructed.
All
and
right.
I do not see anyone, Mayor.
All right. Seeing and hearing no public comment, I will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. I'm happy to entertain a motion. I'm also happy to entertain discussion prior to a motion. So would any of my colleagues like to ask questions or provide any input on this item? Councilmember Amato.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff for so quickly getting this on our agenda. In light of the 3-week outdoor dining closures, did we want to discuss bringing this through the end of January to give it enough time to see if it works? Otherwise,
Stacey, I'm not sure if that question is for the city manager, but
well, I'm looking. Well, I'm looking to my colleagues, I think, on this one, because if we're closed for the next 3 weeks, 1, 2, 3, really doesn't get started until December 17th, which would give us 2 weeks. If we think that's a meaningful time, you know, I'm happy to support the motion, but we're here now knowing that they'll be closed for 3 weeks. So if we could extend it out another 3 weeks to give it kind of the same time frame, I think we could have a more meaningful approach to it. So,
right. I think there's some credit to that thought. My counter thought that's playing around in my head is that the idea with the January 3rd sunset date was to see how it plays out during the holiday period so that we could make any adjustments as necessary. If it's working, but there are additional restrictions or additional modifications to the measure that we need to make in order to harmonize this with the surrounding community or the surrounding businesses, we would still be able to do that with a January 3rd date. The challenge to that, of course, consistent with your point, is that if the folks are going to invest in these outdoor speakers, then presumably they'll want a little bit of time to put them into use, to at a minimum have a little bit of time to recoup their investment. So it's a close call. I can see arguments on both sides, but I'm happy to hear from the rest of our colleagues. Councilmember Campbell.
Sorry, just to follow
sorry,
up.
Councilmember Amato, sorry.
Sorry, just to close the loop on that. We wouldn't have a second meeting in December, and then it sunsets as it's on our agenda right now, listed on January 3rd. And then our next council meeting would be January 12th. So effectively they would have to stop from the 3rd until the 12th. assuming we decided to extend it. So we have an opportunity to just extend it. It doesn't need to be till the end of the month. Maybe it's at least after the first 2 weeks. So it gives them a meaningful time to, and for all of us to see if it works. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would support extending the timeline. I think 3 weeks is extremely short, especially given the news of today. I doubt if we move forward to approve this tonight that not everyone who might have availed themselves of this opportunity will be inclined to, given the changes. However, I would like to say the public speakers this evening on this item really, to me, said it all. I think, why not give this a try for so many reasons? I think it's another opportunity to see what we can do to play with the placemaking in our city. It won't be the same. And oh, by the way, we don't know if we'll be open again in 3 weeks anyhow. But if we can create ambiance where people are still serving their mental well-being by getting out and walking around our city during the holidays, enjoying the beautiful decorations that have just been installed that are everywhere, and having some nice moments with their family in the community as best they can. This is music is transforming, and it would not, in my opinion, be an insignificant sort of magical lift to the environment. And I would rely on enforcement of the rules in terms of decibels and that kind of thing to take care of any issues that we might have. I'd certainly be willing to consider an extended timeline of something like end of January and checking in on it. And I'll stop there and see if other colleagues want to jump in on that. But I definitely am supportive of not waiting, not kicking this down the road, and possibly extending the timeline. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mary. Comments from the rest of council? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think while the dining decks are shut down, I think maybe looking at the retail route would be interesting, just to help draw anyone in as they're walking by, to maybe pop their head in the store and grab some holiday presents for people. I do have some concerns kind of on Pure Plaza. It could be that weird thing where you're listening to 3 different radio stations at once. And I don't know if staff had any recommendations to kind of streamline it and have some continuity there, so you're not having the competing noises as you're trying to enjoy a meal eventually when things open back up.
Right, fair enough. And I think my recollection of reading the ordinance is that the same rules that currently apply down on Pure Plaza. That is, it can't be audible 80 feet from the business, but I'm not sure whether that solves the problem that you've mentioned, which is now that they've all moved out farther in terms of outdoor dining, does that rule really work in terms of making sure that you don't have that multiple radio station effect? Councilmember Fangair, did you have input?
Yes, thank you. I think I agree with the comments about extending the date if possible. Looking at our schedule, if it expires on early January before our first meeting in January, that just gives a gap of not really sure where things are. So I hear what Suja's saying. We want to kind of test it and see where it's going to go. But if we can extend it past the first meeting in January and then have that come back to the council then and make a decision, I think that would be helpful. And then Suja, I think your dog is one item as well. So we'd like to hear what the dog's opinion about it, because he's been pondering about this issue as you were giving us the staff report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Annie. All right, so let me give you my thoughts. I'm supportive of extending the sunset date to, let's say, January 15th. That would give us our January 12th meeting to consider it. And if we did not extend it because there were unforeseen problems, it would give folks 3 days to comply. If we did extend it, it would give them ample time to extend it however far out we want. I'm also amenable to, if we can make modifications tonight to the ordinance to allow this for retail, I'm open to considering that. I'm also open to considering that for coming back. I think there's a couple of things that are in my mind that we ought to be careful of. One is the effect that Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, which is when you're standing in a spot and you're hearing competing input or multiple radio stations coming from different places. When you have outdoor music bunched closely together, whether it's dining establishments or retail establishments or a combination of the two, it's going to create some potential enforcement challenges for us in terms of the volume, because obviously you have a natural tendency for folks to want to make sure that their particular music is heard. So increasing the density of outdoor speakers in an establishment subject to this potentially creates challenges for us, but it's something that I'm open to considering. The other thing I want to make clear to my colleagues and anybody participating is our current rules with respect to audible noise and visibility of televisions and all that stuff to protect the community, to protect neighboring businesses, to protect the experience of visitors have been crafted over a very long period of time, running through the planning commission process and all of that. So I, want to share with you that from my perspective that anything in this regard that we would consider for past the period of declared emergency that we're in as a result of the pandemic would be something that I would think would need to go through the planning commission process and the normal process if we were going to make any longer term adjustments to something like outdoor music. So with all of that said, what's the will of the council in terms of whether we make modifications to allow this at outdoor retail or whether we institute it as written and see whether that's something that we're willing to add after we see how this works in practice, and what's the will of council with respect to the sunset date. My sense is, as I stated, I think consistent with Hanny's comment, that a date that follows shortly after our first meeting in January is probably the most sensible one, so that we can course correct as necessary if there are unintended consequences that we're not seeing. Councilmember Fangari.
Hey, thanks. It's a quick question to staff. I understood Leanne's comment about the distinction between retail and restaurants, but have we heard from any of our business community in the retail business that they do want to have that as an option? I mean, I'm totally fine with it. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't want us to waste our time amending an ordinance if we don't think anybody's going to be utilizing it or using it.
So let me call Leanne back to share that information. I know we've had a couple of meetings this week.
Councilmember Fangari, we have not heard specifically from any of the retailers on their desire to do this, but I think, whether it's the retail or the personal care, I know there are still some personal care services that are, having nail salons outdoors still. So it wouldn't be a tough amendment to just anywhere where the ordinance currently says restaurant to amend to include those.
Okay, thank you. So I think my take on that is to the extent it's simple enough to amend the ordinance to include the other businesses, I think we should. And as far as the date, whatever the Friday is after the first meeting of January, I think that'll be a good time so that the council will have an opportunity in the first meeting of January to evaluate whether or not I want to extend it, and obviously hear from our business community if they care or not care for us to extend it past that time frame. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Annie. Let me interject briefly and ask Madam City Manager if you may not have thought this out given what we're discussing right now, but do you foresee any unintended consequences with expanding this beyond outdoor dining to include retailers?
I do not at this time, but as I think it was Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, some of this we'll just have to see who actually offers this music, puts up speakers. And so it's hard to know until we see people take this up and do it. And so as we go through that, I think we will work with the businesses as they're adding this music feature. All to say, if every single business took us up on it, it might create some conflict, the battle of the bands, battle of the music. But if it's just every several or so, it might work out nicely. So it's hard to say. I think we commit to following the businesses as they add these features. We have a few staff members that are working on these dining decks and working with our retailers. So we'll be able to follow this and make and ask for some course corrections along the way.
All right. Thank you, Suja. Councilmember Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would support adding retail, having this option and giving it a try for a couple of reasons. One, the disruption in the outdoor dining. So there's a little less concern for me with them being given the opportunity. Also, they're still limited indoor shopping capacity. So if there's anybody waiting in line, I know some of the retail, we don't have a lot of retail, but some of the retail have those standing, stand on the spot or the tape. If they have a capacity issue inside and someone has to wait outside, it creates an environment that might draw some attention to their business. And I think for that reason and the other issues that were just raised and clarified, I would support adding, not excluding other businesses, retail businesses from this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Let me now ask the city attorney, is it within this agenda item, and is the ordinance written in such a way that we can tonight make a few modifications so that this is applicable beyond outdoor dining and would include retail establishments?
Well, retail establishments were not contemplated in the agenda item. So I think that you need to make, as a council, you need to make your own determination as to whether you believe that anyone reading the agenda might have, been misled, or whose interests might be affected, would be concerned about expanding the effect of the suspension. I think weighing against that is the fact that the suspension lasts for a fairly limited period of time. I also think it may depend on exactly how you define the expansion that you're talking about. Are we talking about all retail? Are we talking about personal services as well? Beauty salons, nail salons, other personal services? Are we talking about every commercial establishment, offices? I think the more you expand it, I think the more a concern is generated that this ordinance is far more expansive than was contemplated by the agenda item. Ultimately, as you know, the purpose of the agenda under the Brown Act is to give notice to the public as to what the council is going to consider. But, the agenda can't contemplate each and every little thing that comes up during a meeting related to an agenda item. So it becomes a judgment call. Is how far can we deviate before we are really compromising the notice that we've given of the item by way of the agenda.
Understood. The agenda item itself references only commercial establishments, but the published staff recommendation is specific to outdoor dining. So I'm comfortable on first glance that the agenda item is expansive enough to accommodate an expansion like the one we're talking about. But let me just turn now to the more practical consideration, and that is, do we have in our lexicon, so to speak, any phrasing that would allow us to limit this along the lines of what you just mentioned, which is, does this apply to offices? Does this apply to personal services? Does this apply to retail? Do we have any limiting language that we have used in the past, which might be consistent with the discussion that the council has had?
Well, if you're asking, is there some precedent for distinguishing among the different types of commercial activities? certainly there is in the context of the pandemic. We have treated businesses differently. Certainly, we've treated restaurants differently than retail, differently than personal services. And certainly we can, as long as what you're proposing is reasonable, you can certainly distinguish among those uses based on the purpose and intent of the ordinance. The original intention of the staff was to provide an incentive for people to eat out by creating a nicer environment when people are eating and staying stationary in one place for a period of time to have a meal, to create, in effect, a holiday spirit. That was the purpose, to create more of a holiday spirit, and to incentivize people to eat in our restaurants. If you want to expand that, I think you just need to expand it in a way that is consistent with that intent. How many businesses playing music outdoors will increase the holiday spirit, so to speak, and invite people to come downtown, shop downtown, and spend money downtown?
With the major variable of the health officer order hanging over the conversation. So this is ultimately going to be a judgment call by the council collectively. My sense right off the top of my head is if we knew outdoor dining decks were going to continue to be allowed through the holiday season, we have a good number of them right now, and that might add holiday cheer throughout downtown. Given the uncertainty about that, and even if it was allowed, expanding it to retail and personal services establishments might be appropriate. I think that narrow limitation has some appeal to me, simply borrowing from terminology we've used previously in the pandemic, specific to retail and personal service establishments, might ultimately be good. I think it's worth pointing out that the success of a program like this is going to require the businesses to work together and to police each other to make sure that this is done in harmony with neighbors on our commercial strips, as well as the neighbors in front and behind of them who might be different uses, such as residential. So everybody who is going to participate in this program obviously has a vested interest in making it work. But we have to take into account what are reasonable limitations within this agenda item that are agreeable to the council collectively. So with that preface, let me go back to the council to see if there's any additional comment or input that my colleagues want to provide. All right. Seeing none at this point, let me go back to the city attorney. Let me just clarify, have we in our COVID-19 orders used the term retail and personal services establishments so that if we added language to that effect to this, it would be consistent with what we've done before, and it would be clear to the businesses that are subject to this order, as well as to our city staff in terms of educating the businesses and enforcing the new order?
Yes, we have. We have used those terms: restaurants, personal services establishments, retail establishments. Yes.
All right. So I really need to hear from council about whether that limited expansion is something that appeals to you, or whether you have something more expansive in mind, or whether you think that that's going too far. So let me first turn to Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support those three categories. All three could potentially be gift ideas for the holidays, as Mr. City Attorney pointed out. This kind of arose especially because of the holidays and carolers and things like that happen during that time that are expected. The kids are out of school for a bit and all of that. People are in the mood to enjoy the holidays. So I would support that, those changes. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mary. Councilmember Campbell, Councilmember Armato.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the January 15th sunset date and adding retail and personal services as well.
Thank you, Stacy. Councilmember Fangari.
Same, I support those changes as well.
All right. That's a majority of the council. Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to be heard or should we just call for a motion? All right. May I have a motion? Well, let me first stop and say, Mike, do we need to, with this narrow expansion, do we need to go through the drafting of the modification to the ordinance, or can we advance a motion and vote on it, which simply reflects that we're approving the ordinance, changing the sunset date to January 15th, and adding personal service and retail establishments to the scope of the ordinance?
Right, those changes will be made in section 2 of the ordinance, so that January 3rd will be changed to the 15th, and then it'll apply to any restaurant that offers on-site outdoor dining and any retail and personal service establishments.
All right. So what I'm looking for is a motion from one of my colleagues to approve the ordinance with the change that the sunset date will be January 15th and personal service and retail establishments will be added to the scope of the ordinance. Who wishes to make such a motion? Councilmember Campbell.
Did it? Or can I just say so moved?
So moved is fine as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Thought you did a good job.
Councilmember Armato, seconds. Okay. Any last input from council? Seeing and hearing.
Mr. Mayor, just a final thought. I'm sure staff already plans on doing this, but to loop in our businesses to let them know that we've passed this tonight and that we've extended the coverage to retail and personal services. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you. Seeing and hearing no further comments or input, Mr. City Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, pardon me. Madam City Manager.
Can we take public comment?
I thought we already did that.
We did. Okay. Sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. Mr. City Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato.
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem DeToy.
Aye.
And Mayor Massey.
Aye.
The motion is approved by unanimous consent. The item passes. And before we move forward, Mayor, I just wanted to defer to Mike as far as reading this ordinance. I have it up, Mike, but as far as the modifications, do we need to read the title into the record just to make it official?
Sure, Eddie, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Go ahead and get that. Okay, this is an urgency ordinance of the City of Hermosa Beach to temporarily suspend Section 8.24.040A of the Hermosa Beach Municipal Code, regulating the placement of stereo speakers outdoors or in windows/doorways facing outdoors from November 25th, 2020 through January 15th, 2021 at restaurants that offer outdoor dining, and now that has been expanded to also include retail businesses and personal care businesses on site, and setting forth the facts constituting such urgency. And that concludes the reading of the ordinance.
Thank you, Eddie. Just one quick clarification. I believe the terminology is personal services establishments instead of personal care. I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Personal services establishments noted. Mayor Massey, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. What is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 14C, and that is the adoption of an urgency ordinance of the City of Hermosa Beach, California, amending the temporary moratorium on commercial evictions to prevent premature evictions in advance or remodel/demolition during the COVID-19 pandemic, and setting forth the facts constituting such urgency. And we have City Attorney Michael Jenkins to provide this report.
Okay.
Mayor, members of the council, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the City Council passed a commercial eviction moratorium ordinance that protects commercial tenants from eviction if they are unable to pay rent due to the financial impacts associated with the pandemic. That ordinance is in place, and it is in place until January, the end of January of 2021, unless extended by the council. That moratorium ordinance does not, however, protect a tenant from an eviction where the landlord intends to demolish or substantially remodel the commercial property that is under lease. The purpose of the agenda item tonight is to allow the city council to consider whether to pass an urgency ordinance, which, like the previous one, requires a 4/5 vote of the city council, to amend the commercial eviction moratorium ordinance to prevent a landlord from evicting a tenant for the purpose of remodel or rehabilitating the property unless that landlord has all required city permits in hand. The idea here is to protect the local economy by keeping the tenants in business for as long as they can possibly remain in business before they have to leave in order for the landlord to perform the remodeling and the rehabilitation. Oftentimes, the landlord will evict the tenant, and then the property will remain vacant for a period of time while the landlord is obtaining all of the necessary permits. That means that the tenant has been out of business prematurely, and the city has lost an active business at a time when businesses in the city are suffering due to the pandemic. And so it hurts the city for a business to be prematurely evicted. It hurts the city's finances. It hurts the tenant's finances. It hurts the community at large. And it leaves a vacant space during a temporary time period when the tenant could continue to be operating. The proposed ordinance doesn't prohibit the landlord ultimately from evicting the tenant in order to remodel the premises. What it simply does is it delays it by requiring the landlord to do their due diligence and get all the necessary permits before they actually evict the tenant. So this came to our attention by virtue of a business that was faced with this situation. You heard something about that tonight during public participation. You have a letter that you received that's in the record, but there may be others who might be affected by this that we don't know about. And so this is an ordinance of general applicability. It doesn't just apply to this one business, but it would apply across the board to all businesses in the city. And with that, Mayor, that will conclude my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Councilmember Fangari.
Thank you. Mike, can you walk us through I think basically we're shifting the burden on the landlord for potentially trying to evict, but as you know, we've had a few development projects where the council or the planning commission is dealing with the developers, not, moving fast enough and getting into a cutoff date where their permit's going to expire. So if we tell a landlord that you're not going to be able to evict somebody until you have all the permits in hand, and by so doing delaying their due diligence or other planning for construction, is that going to put them in a spot where when their permit is about to expire and they said, well, we're not ready yet, or we haven't done what we've needed to do, and they go back and say, well, the city, you told us we can't evict these people until we get permits, and it took us a while to evict them, and now that we have the permits, we're waiting for them to leave. And as you know, more in the residential than the commercial, but a lot of times people in the residential end end up filing a unlawful detainer action, or the landlord had to file an unlawful detainer action. The residents would oppose it, and it could take weeks or months to evict somebody. So that's my concern, is if we are telling a landlord we're going to defer you being able to evict somebody until we have all permits in hand, is that gonna come back to us later? I says, well, you delayed me and that's why I can't finish the project, or I can't comply with the permit deadline requirements because you basically delayed me by X amount of weeks or months to get started. And if that's the case, is there a remedy in the resolution that would address this issue?
Thank you. There's not anything in the ordinance that would address the issue, and I can certainly see the potential for the conflict that you have identified. So let me say this. When a building owner or property owner obtains a building permit, the building permit is generally good for 2 years. That is to say, they have to complete the project within 2 years. Now, if they've gone to the Planning Commission and it's a more complex project and it involves building something new from scratch, Planning Commission has the discretion to extend that period of time. So I could see a number of different circumstances where this could arise. So let's just walk through a couple of examples. So if you've got somebody who wants to evict a tenant because they intend to demolish the building entirely and build a new project, they would likely have gone to the Planning Commission and obtained the necessary discretionary entitlements. They might have, at that point, asked for some additional time beyond the usual, the 2-year limit. We don't know because we're just dealing with hypotheticals. So let's say that, but let's say that they just have the 2 years. They come in and they get their building permit, and then they evict, and then it takes some period of time for the eviction to occur. In the best case scenario, maybe 30 days. Maybe as you note, maybe longer if they run into some complications or they have to file an unlawful detainer. Under our code, the building official has the discretion to extend the building permit twice for 6 months at a time due to circumstances outside the control of the permittee. So if the permittee were to come in and say after 2 years, I had a problem, it took me 3 or 4 months to evict my tenant because of the city's ordinance, the building official would have the discretion to extend the permit 6 months and then another 6 months. So the building, the property owner would have 3 years for the construction of a building. I don't know how many commercial buildings are out there slated for demolition and new construction. My sense is that what we're really focusing on here is remodeling of tenant spaces in existing buildings, where the time period for the construction is considerably less than the outside limit or the outside duration of a building permit. And it would typically not take 2 years or 3 years for a property owner to do an interior remodel with tenant improvements for a new tenant. I mean, that would be a really, really long time. So I think in the majority of cases, we wouldn't run into the kind of problem that you've identified. And I suppose that if we did, council could address it at that time, keeping in mind that this is an emergency measure and we're not going to keep it in effect beyond the pandemic emergency.
All right, thank you, Mike. That answers my question. I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Annie. Any other questions? Councilmember Armato.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question or clarification from our city attorney. We got a letter from Kyle, and who's a residential tenant of the same building, in fact. On our earlier item, we were able to change the language of the ordinance, the urgency ordinance, to add, retail and personal services. On this one, could we amend the ordinance to include residential tenancies during the emergency period as well? Or do we need to direct staff to bring that back if that's what we were looking for as well?
On the other one, on the previous matter, I think that the mayor referred to the fact that the title of the item on the agenda said consideration of a temporary suspension of Hermosa Beach code regulation of outdoor stereo speakers at commercial establishments. And I think that the idea was, well, that's pretty broad. And you had to read further to see that we were really just regulating restaurants. Here, the title really just talks about commercial evictions. It doesn't make reference to residential evictions.
Okay.
And if I were a residential property owner and I was reading the agenda, I would think, this doesn't apply to me. I don't need to worry about it unless I was the kind of person who wanted to come here and argue against extending it out of fear that you might. But I think that if you wanted to extend it to residential, I think the council should direct us to bring something back at your next meeting. But I really don't think that we gave adequate notice to residential property owners that this might be extended to them.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions from council before I open it up for public comment? Seeing and hearing none, I will open public comment. As always, anybody participating who wants to give input, if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand on Zoom and we'll go to you first in order through the city clerk. Once we work through all the people on Zoom, we'll then work on people who are participating by phone, who will dial *6 in order to open up their phone line and queue up so that we can take their public comment. And then finally, we'll return back, make sure there's nobody left on Zoom or on the phone before we close public comment. So with that, Mr. City Clerk, are there any hands raised on Zoom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we definitely didn't have any speakers sign up for this item. I see no hands raised, and I also see no more participants that are joining us by phone.
Okay, so there's no possibility that somebody's going to want to participate by phone at this point. And nobody raising their hand on Zoom, correct?
That is correct.
All right, seeing and hearing no public comment, I will close public comment and bring it back to council. And let me just quickly kick off with my quick thoughts on the point that Councilmember Fangari raised. I thought that was a good point when the city attorney reminded me that we had the special extensions for 6 months. I think that amply covers any property owner who has to go through eviction proceedings that last up to 12 months and allows them to extend their permits in that type of scenario. So I think from my perspective, that fully resolves the issue that Councilmember Fangari raised, and I'm supportive of this amendment for the very reason that the city attorney laid out at the beginning, which is that this ensures that folks are allowed to stay in business as long as possible before ground is broken on refurbishing or remodeling or renovating the premises in which they occupy. So I think that's a worthy goal and something that I support. So with that, let me turn to my colleagues to see whether folks have questions or input. Councilmember Armato.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to extend a debt of gratitude to our city manager and city attorney for identifying this loophole or issue in town quickly and getting it on our agenda. I had an opportunity to speak with David, the owner of La Pinita, earlier today, and to say that he is grateful is an understatement. I mean, we heard from him a little earlier, but this has been their business for 41 years or longer even. Certainly a staple in Hermosa Beach, and how he provides his livelihood for his family and his employees. And assuming we get the support tonight on this ordinance, which I hope we do, this is really meaningful for him, and potentially impacts other commercial tenants as well. I just, again, really want to emphasize my gratitude for the fast act of our city attorney and our city manager on this item, and I'll be supporting it. And as I spoke to earlier, I mean, I'd love to have support to ask staff to bring back similar urgency ordinance as it relates to residential tenancy at our next meeting, assuming we have the support to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Additional input from council. Councilmember Fangari.
Just real quickly, I think I agree with you on the city attorney, the issues that he raised in response to my question addressed my concern as well. So I'm planning to support staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Adding that I intend to support this and appreciate the expeditious way it has been brought forward. And I just wanted to clarify that with regard to the residential question, so there's a normal eviction process that takes, I think you just said 12 months. Would that be the same if they were giving the reason of a demolition? So in other words, could they do a demolition request eviction more quickly? And if so, I would support the idea of having that brought back as well for a look. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but since Councilmember Armato raised it, I would support that as well.
Well, just to clarify before the city attorney weighs in, I didn't mean to say that the eviction process takes 12 months. It can be protracted, I understand, but I don't think it takes 12 months typically. I don't recall the city attorney mentioning that timeframe either. What I know is that 12 months is the maximum in 2 different requests that you can have your permits extended if there are unforeseen circumstances out of your control. So with that, Mr. City Attorney, did you want to weigh in response to Councilmember Campbell?
I haven't really thought through all of the ramifications associated with extending this idea to residential tenancies. There are different considerations. I think that if the council wants us to bring something back, we can bring it back and think it through and answer questions at that time. There's differences, obviously, between landlords of commercial buildings that decide they want to remodel and upgrade and change the commercial tenant and residential. And I just would want to think those differences through. And there may be, it may be that we see more demolition of residential buildings in town than we see commercial. And I don't really know what all the ramifications of that are. So I think we would probably want to think that through before we brought you back something at your next meeting.
Makes sense. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
And let me, not to cut off any deliberation, but let me suggest that we vote on the item presented, the staff recommendation presented, because I believe that there's a majority for that. So let me ask for a motion on that particular recommendation. And then once we vote on that motion, if it is seconded, we will circle back to whether there's a will of the council to direct staff to consider an analogous ordinance with respect to residential evictions. Do I have such a motion?
Happy to make that motion, Mr. Mayor, that we adopt urgency ordinance number 20-1420U of the City of Hermosa Beach to amend provisions of the moratorium on commercial evictions and setting forth the facts constituting such urgency.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Campbell. Additional input or questions from council? Seeing and hearing none. Mr. City Clerk, would you call the vote on the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato,
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy,
Aye.
and Mayor Massey.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. Now let's take up the issue of residential. My thought process, for what it's worth, is similar to what the city attorney just expressed, which is I think the residential context may have different factors at play than the commercial context. And so I'm absolutely amenable to it if there's a good reason, just like there is in the commercial context, and there may well be. My only question is whether or not we want to take the step of directing staff to come back with an agenda item, or whether we want to just simply allow staff to respond to the discussion here tonight, take a look at it, and come back to us if they view it as something that has merit that should be put before council. So I think that's the question before the council right now. So with
Also-
that,
And also keeping in mind that like the future agenda item, we really can't get into a discussion about the merits of it because it's not on the agenda. It's really just a question of giving us some direction here.
Sure.
Bring it back.
So let me first, oh, sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt. Councilmember Amato, let me turn to you first. Do you want to make a pitch for a motion to direct staff to study this in the residential context and bring something back?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I think it would need to come back at our next meeting to have the effective date make sense. So, yes.
All right. The rest of my colleagues, I invite you to provide input. Councilmember Campbell.
I just have a quick question to clarify. I think it might be obvious, but maybe not. It would include multi-unit residential as well as any other leased residential situation.
Councilmember Armato.
That's my understanding.
That would be mine as well.
Yeah, I seem to recall we had a similar scenario from a multi-unit residential property, and I would support it being explored by our staff for consideration similarly as the motion we just passed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Fangari. You're muted.
Thank you. I would just ask that if the consensus to bring it back, that this issue be brought back to council in January, not in December. I just get concerned about an issue of this significance being discussed at a holiday, close to a holiday meeting where people say, they didn't get an opportunity to give their opinion about it because it was done during the holidays. And it probably will take a little bit of time to figure out the details of it anyway. So I'd just rather it not come at the very first next meeting, but come back to us in next year.
Mr. Mayor, at the risk of getting too deep into a discussion, I'll do my best to respect not doing that. First, this would only, or my intention would be to be reflective of this same ordinance and only be during the pandemic period, not infinitum. And then second, if we don't discuss it at our December meeting, it won't go into effect before the end of the year, and essentially would, poor Kyle and his wife certainly are one example of people that would be out of a house before the holiday. So I get, under normal circumstances, we could wait until January, but we do risk residents being kicked out before the end of the year without discussing it before the end of the year.
Councilmember Fangari.
Thank you. With that explanation, I retract my concern. I was thinking more long-term, and there's a lot of obviously hundreds of residential rental properties in Hermosa Beach. But if we're talking about a short time frame during the pandemic, I would not be opposed to having this issue be raised at the December meeting if staff concurs.
Thank you.
Right. And for what it's worth, I view credible arguments on both sides of this issue again. I think ultimately, as I think this through, I'm going to take the city attorney's admonition not to get into the details of it. So I think we have a majority. As much as I'm tempted to put the mayor pro tem on the spot for his thoughts about it, I'll leave his vote to speak for him. So do I have a motion to direct staff?
So moved.
And this is to direct staff to study an analogous ordinance in the residential context?
And come back at our next city council meeting. Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second. Or yeah, give it to Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm going to give that one to the Mayor Pro Tem to
Good time.
even things out a little bit, because you're way ahead on the leaderboard, Mary. Any further input from council? All right, we have a motion to direct staff to come back at our next meeting with a discussion of an emergency ordinance similar to the commercial ordinance we just passed. Mr. City Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Armato?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Detoy?
Aye.
And Mayor Massey?
Aye.
The item passes.
All right, thank you, Eddie. And what is next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 14D, authorization of the city clerk to continue advertising and requesting applications for a representative to the Los Angeles County West Vector and Vector-Borne Control District Board. And I'd like to turn it over to Madam City Manager Suja Lowenthal to provide this report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk and Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I wanted to put before you the option of appointing our incumbent, who's also applied for this position at the January 12th meeting. So we do not have to re-advertise. Initially, when I looked at the staff report, I had not thought it through as well as I should have. And so you have the option of just making that appointment and not re-advertising.
We, Madam City Manager, we have that option with a vote tonight to make an appointment effective January 12th, 2021.
Actually, no, I was just suggesting that you would make that appointment on January. I don't think, Mr. City Attorney, could you refresh my memory? I don't believe that they're able to make an early appointment, are they?
In this case, Suja, I believe that the council may actually be able to do so, but I defer to our city attorney, Mike, if there was anything that you might be able to provide as far as insight on this. But from my understanding, I believe as long as the council, we have a majority of the council that does vote for approval, we can move forward with our incumbent.
Well, Mayor, Council, here's the thing. We've already advertised once, and so we've fulfilled that obligation. The item on tonight's agenda is to seek authorization to keep advertising. The city manager is suggesting that since we only got one application from our incumbent, who gave you a nice report earlier in the meeting, that you just forego further advertising. And if you're comfortable with that, then I think at your next meeting, we can have an item appointing him for another 2-year term. So you could just defer taking any action at all on this item tonight, receive and file it and move on, and we can have an item on. And if for any reason we ascertain that there's a legal bar to appointing him before January, we'll let you know. But otherwise, our intent would be to bring it back at your next meeting for an appointment. And we could put it on the consent calendar.
Is there any objection to proceeding in that fashion among the council? Seeing Councilmember Campbell.
No objection. I just have a quick question because city attorney just mentioned there's been one advertisement, and I wondered if that advertisement listed a deadline for submitting an application, and if so, has that deadline passed?
So,
Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Madam City Manager.
you know what, Mr. City Clerk, go ahead. I really only wanted to encourage council to consider that they did not have to re-advertise.
Understood. Yes, Councilmember Campbell, to answer your question, there was a deadline set for the applications. I would just need to look back to see what that deadline was. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was towards the end of October, but I can definitely confirm that. And it was advertised in the Easy Reader for multiple weeks, and hoping. And we also posted it in all our other normal locations, in our bulletin board and other locations around the city.
Right. And I'll just point out that the deadline would only be germane to the appointment itself, not to the question of whether we continue to advertise. We just need to make sure that by the date of our meeting where we make the appointment, that date is after the deadline for applications, it would seem to me. So with that in mind, Councilmember Campbell.
If I'm reading this right, the first advertisement listed in November 19th, and tonight's opportunity would be to re-advertise and extend it till December 31st. So I would support, in theory, not re-advertising as we've just discussed. Thank you.
Right. And I'm going to call for a motion to that effect in a moment. But first, let me hear from Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just clarifying that per the staff report, the application filing deadline was Tuesday, November 19th. So we're beyond that deadline.
All right. Do I have a motion to direct the city clerk not to continue advertising and requesting applications for a Hermosa Beach representative to the Los Angeles County West Vector and Vector-Borne Disease Control District Board?
So moved.
Councilmember Amato, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need to take public comment unless I missed that.
Fair enough. So just to make sure we have a clear record, Councilmember Amato, will you withdraw the motion so I can open public comment?
Sure.
All right. I apologize. Thank you for reminding me. Hearing no further questions or comments from council, allow me to open this item up for public comment. As usual, if there's anybody participating by Zoom who wishes to make public comment or offer public comment, please raise your hand on Zoom if you haven't already signed up prior to the meeting to give public comment on this item. And if you are on a telephone participating, you're going to want to dial *6 and state your name, and we will put you in the queue. So with all that being said, Mr. City Clerk, do we have anybody waiting to provide public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see no hands raised. And again, we no longer have any participants joining us by phone.
Okay. Seeing and hearing no public comment, I will close public comment and bring it back to council. Councilmember Amato, would you like to make the same motion again, or would you like to renew the motion you made a few moments ago?
Renewing the motion.
All right. Councilmember Campbell, would you like to renew your second?
I will renew the second.
All right. Is there any further input from council? Seeing none. Mr. City Clerk, would you please call the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Amato?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Fangari?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem DeToy?
Aye.
And Mayor Massey?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. What is next on our agenda?
And so, Mr. Mayor, as I indicated, we will bring back the appointment either at your next meeting or in January, depending on what the statute requires.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Mr. City Clerk, what's next on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That takes us to item 15, future agenda items. And we have 15A, tentative future agenda items to go over.
All right. Let me open it up to the council. Does anybody have any questions or input on our tentative future agenda items? Seeing none, I want to make a broader comment about our agenda. We have been focused for a long period of time out of necessity on managing the city through the pandemic. And to your credit, you've all done a terrific job. Our staff has done a terrific job. Our agendas have focused on that. I think there are big picture or bigger picture items floating out there that we have kept off the agenda, in part because we are meeting remotely and we want to take up larger matters when we're back in council chambers. But given the trajectory of the pandemic and the likely timeline for us getting back into council chambers, I'm not sure if we can continue to wait to take up some bigger picture items that have been sitting on our tentative future agenda items and have been priorities for various members of the council for a while. So I think in my discussions with city staff in terms of how the agenda is assembled, I'm going to be discussing what big picture items out there that we have been holding off because we've been focused on managing the pandemic. Those may take the form of study sessions, they may take the form of agenda items. But my understanding is that there are items like that that have been deferred for quite a while as we focus on managing the pandemic. And I think we're going to need to get to those sometime soon, whether we are meeting remotely or whether we are back to meeting in person. So I just wanted to throw that out there to alert council to sort of my thought process. I invite any council members, if you have thoughts of your own, to reach out to me now. If city manager has any input, or to reach out to me offline at any point in time. But I think we're going to need to begin to take up stuff that's stayed off of our agenda while we've been managing the pandemic. All right. Seeing no additional input on the tentative future agenda items, I will go ahead and close this item. And Mr. City Clerk, are we at adjournment?
Yes, sir, we are, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let me quickly thank everybody for attending, staff and council members. We will adjourn to Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. for a Safer Prospect community meeting. That is based on the expectation that a quorum of the council will be present at that community meeting. And the next meeting of the council will be our regular city council meeting on Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, starting at 5 p.m. for a closed session and followed by our regular meeting at 6 o'clock p.m. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Night, guys.